Hi, I'm Jake Thompson. I'm just your average 32-year-old guy, working in real estate in small-town Texas. It's honest work, like my dad always taught me before he passed away. Speaking of dad, he left me and my sister, Sarah, a big piece of land to share. That land means the world to me. It's like having a piece of him still with us, you know? Sarah is married to a guy named Mark. Let me tell you, Mark always has these half-baked, get-rich-quick ideas, and he's got a temper, too. They've been bugging me to sell my half of the land. They see dollar signs, but I see memories. Jake, think about the potential, Sarah would say, all excited, but I'd just shake my head. Sis, this land is our heritage. It's not for sale. Then Mark would jump in. You're holding us back, Jake. Don't you want your sister to be happy? Happy? More like broke, once Mark's latest scheme fails. Thank goodness for my girlfriend, Emma. She's a school teacher and probably the most patient person alive for dealing with all this family drama. Jake, you're doing the right thing, she'd say, squeezing my hand. Your dad would be proud. My best friend Tom, the town sheriff, has my back too. We go way back. Jake, if Mark causes any trouble, you let me know, he'd say in his serious sheriff voice. But the real troublemaker is Mark's mom, Linda. She could start a fight in an empty room. Jake, dear, she'd say in her fake sweet voice, why are you being so difficult? Don't you want what's best for the family? Every time she says family, I want to remind her that blood doesn't mean anything when you're trying to cheat your own kin. Things have been tense lately. Mark's been acting weird, like a ticking time bomb. I've caught him glaring at me from across the street, muttering under his breath. It's starting to creep me out. Just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, my phone rings at 2 a.m. It's Sarah, and she sounds terrified. Jake, she whispers, her voice shaking. I need to see you now, it's urgent. My stomach drops. What the heck is going on? I know it's not going to be good. I rush to meet Sarah at Mabel's diner, where we usually catch up. The place is almost empty at this hour. Just old Joe sitting at the counter with his coffee. Sarah's already there, hunched over a cup of coffee, her eyes red and puffy. Sarah, what's going on? I ask. I slide into the booth across from Sarah. She looks up, and that's when I notice a fading bruise near her eye. My heart sinks. Jake, I don't know what to do anymore, she chokes out. Mark, he hit me. It's not the first time. I clench my fists under the table. Jesus, Sarah, you need to leave him, now. She shakes her head frantically. I can't. He says he'll change if we just had the money from the land sale. Please, Jake, sell your share. It'll fix everything. Selling the land won't fix anything, I say. Mark's the problem, not money. You don't understand, she hisses. He's got debts, bad ones. If we don't pay. I lean forward. Then let me help you. We'll go to Tom, get a restraining order. No, she cuts me off. No cops, just think about it, okay? I leave the diner with a heavy heart, her plea echoing in my mind. A few days later, I'm out on the land fixing a broken fence when I hear the sound of tires on gravel. I turn to see Mark's truck, swerving as it comes to a stop. He stumbles out, reeking of booze, holding a shovel. Well, if it ain't the stubborn mule himself, he slurs. Mark, you're drunk, go home. He staggers closer. Not without that land, Jakey boy. It's not for sale, Mark, not now, not ever. His face twists with rage. You selfish prick, you're ruining everything. I hold up my hands. Mark, calm down. Let's talk about this when you're sober. Talk? I'm done talking. He swings the shovel. I try to dodge, but I'm too slow. Pain explodes in my head, and I hit the ground hard, my vision blurring. Mark is shouting, but I can't make out the words. Another blow lands, then another, and everything goes dark. I drift in and out of consciousness. Sirens, voices, Emma's tear-streaked face, Tom's gruff orders to the paramedics, the sterile smell of a hospital. When I finally wake up properly, I'm in a hospital bed. Everything hurts. Emma is asleep in a chair beside me, holding my hand. My voice is barely a whisper. She jolts awake. Jake, oh thank God. She peppers my face with gentle kisses. Tom appears in the doorway, his face grim. Good to see you awake, buddy. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. What happened? Tom's jaw clenches. Mark, we found his truck near the scene. He's in custody. The memories flood back. Sarah, the land, Mark with the shovel. Jake, Emma says softly, what do you want to do? I close my eyes, feeling the weight of family ties and the need for justice fighting inside me. I don't know yet, but something's got to change. The hospital becomes my world for the next few weeks. Visitors come and go, but whispers follow them everywhere. Everyone's talking about Mark's attack, like I'm the star of some twisted reality show I never signed up for. One day, Sarah shows up, looking like she hasn't slept in weeks. "Jake, I'm so sorry," Sarah sobs. "I should have told you everything sooner." "Told me what?" I ask. She spills it all: Mark's abuse, his gambling debts, and the shady development deal he's been bragging about. "He swore if we got your land, all our problems would be solved." I scoff. "Yeah, his problems maybe." Just then, my phone buzzes. Another message from Mark: "Keep your mouth shut if you know what's good for you." I show Sarah, and her face goes pale. "Oh God, Jake, what have I done?" she whispers. Emma walks in, catching the tail end of our conversation. "Jake, you need to tell Tom about these threats." I nod. "Yeah, I think you're right, but it's not just Mark we have to worry about. His mom, Linda, is on a one-woman mission to rewrite history." As the nurse checks my vitals, she gossips. "Did you hear? Linda's telling everyone you attacked Mark first, said he was just defending himself." I clench my fists, wincing in pain. "That's bull." "I know, honey," the nurse says, patting my arm. Nobody's buying it. When I'm finally released from the hospital, the whole town is buzzing about a public meeting concerning the land development. Emma drives me there, her hand steady on my arm as we walk in. The place is packed. I spot Mark near the front, looking all apologetic. Linda is beside him, glaring at me. Mayor Johnson calls the meeting to order. "We're here to discuss the proposed development of the Thompson land." Mark stands up, looking like a kicked puppy. "Before we start, I'd like to say something." He turns to me. "Jake, I'm so sorry for what happened. I was out of my mind with stress. Can you ever forgive me?" The room goes silent. I can feel everyone's eyes on me. "Mark," I say, keeping my voice steady, "I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change anything. The land's not for sale." Mark's face twitches. "But Jake, think of the opportunities. This development could put our town on the map." I stand up, ignoring the pain. Our dad left us that land to preserve, not to turn into some half-baked resort. Linda jumps in. "Now, Jake, don't be hasty. Mark's changed. He's got big plans." "Big plans?" I cut her off. "Like the big plans that left him in debt? Or the big plans that ended with him attacking me with a shovel?" The room erupts in murmurs. Mayor Johnson bangs his gavel. "Order, please." I take a deep breath. "Look, I'm not here to air dirty laundry. I'm here to say this: that land stays in the family, undeveloped. End of story." As I sit down, I catch Sarah's eye across the room. She gives me a small nod, a glimmer of the sister I used to know. But as we file out of the hall, I can still feel the tension hanging in the air. I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. Mark's watching me, his eyes cold. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a whole new battle. The phone rings, jolting me awake. It's Mabel from the county clerk's office. Her voice is shaking. "Jake, you need to get down here now. Someone's trying to push through a sale on your land." The signature looks fishy. My stomach drops. I know exactly who's behind this. At the office, Mabel shows me the documents. There's my signature, clear as day, but it's not mine. "That son of a," I start, but Mabel cuts me off. "What are you going to do?" I take a deep breath. "I've got an idea, but I'll need some help." I call Tom, laying out my plan. He's hesitant at first, but agrees it might be our best shot. Then I dial Mark's number. Well, if it ain't the holdout," Mark drawls. "Listen, Mark, I've been thinking. Maybe we should talk about this land deal face to face." There's a pause. "About damn time. Meet me at the old barn on the property." 1 hour. I get there early, wired up with Tom's help. My heart's pounding so hard I'm afraid the mic might pick it up. Mark swaggers in, all cocky smiles. "So, you finally came to your senses, huh?" I force a smile. Yeah, well, times are tough. But before we do this, I've got to know, why'd you do it, Mark? The attack? The forged documents? He laughs, a cold, harsh sound. Why? Because you were in my way, Jake. This development deal is my ticket out of this backwater town, and I wasn't about to let you and your sentimental crap stop me, even if it meant nearly killing me? I ask. He sneers. You should have seen your face when I swung that shovel. Thought that might knock some sense into you. And if this little chat doesn't work out, well, accidents happen, Jake. Especially out here, all alone. That's when Tom steps out from behind the barn door, his badge glinting in the sunlight. That's enough, Mark. You're under arrest. Mark's face goes from shock to rage in seconds. He lunges at me, but Tom's quicker, tackling him to the ground. As Tom cuffs him, I feel a mix of relief and sadness. This is family after all, or at least, it was. The arrest sends shockwaves through town. Turns out Mark's big development deal was all smoke and mirrors. His investors pull out faster than you can say fraud. A few days later, Sarah shows up at my door, her eyes red and rimmed with tears. Jake, I don't even know where to start. I'm so sorry for everything. I sigh, leaning against the doorframe. I know, Sarah. But sorry doesn't fix this. She nods, tears spilling over. I hope someday we can be brother and sister again. Someday, I agree. But not today. Linda tries to run damage control, showing up at the sheriff's office and claiming Mark was set up. But Tom shuts that down quick. Ma'am, we have him on tape confessing. It's over. As for the land, I knew what I had to do. At the next town meeting, I stood up, my voice steady. I want to turn the Thompson land into a community park, a place for families, for memories, in honor of my father. The room erupted in cheers. Emma squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. Months passed, and the park project was in full swing. My real estate business was booming. Turns out, people appreciate honesty. Who knew? One evening, I took Emma for a walk through the half-finished park. We stopped by the old oak tree, the one Dad and I used to climb. Emma, I said, my heart racing. I couldn't have gotten through any of this without you. I dropped to one knee, pulling out the ring I'd been carrying for weeks. Will you marry me? Her eyes went wide, then crinkled with joy. Yes, 1,000 times yes. As we walked back, hand in hand, I reflected on everything that had happened. Mark was in prison, facing years for assault and fraud. Linda had become a pariah, her manipulative ways finally catching up to her. And Sarah, we were talking again, slowly rebuilding what was broken. But standing here with Emma by my side and the park stretching out before us, I felt nothing but hope. This land, this legacy, it's more than just acres and trees. It's a promise. A promise to live with honesty and to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. All right, folks, that's the end of my story. Now I've got a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you ever forgive Sarah and try to rebuild your relationship with her? Or is some betrayal just too deep to come back from? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear what you'd do in this situation. And hey, if you enjoyed this wild ride, why not hit that like button? It really helps out the channel. Oh, and if you want to hear more stories like this, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening, y'all. Until next time.
The sharp scent of coffee wafted through the small municipal office as I clutched the birth certificate form for my newborn daughter, Lily. The monotonous hum of the air conditioner filled the silence as I waited patiently in line. That's when I caught sight of him, my husband Jake, standing at the receptionist's counter with a young woman. My heart sank as I watched the petite blonde hand over a stack of papers, her body language far too casual for a professional interaction. Jake leaned in closer, whispering something that made her giggle. An icy chill ran down my spine. Why was he here? With her? Jake? I called out, my voice wavering. He spun around, his eyes widening like a deer caught in headlights. Emma, what are you doing here? He stammered, his face flushing crimson. I could ask you the same thing, I replied, struggling to control the tremor in my voice. I thought you had an important meeting at work? The woman beside him shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting between us. Jake cleared his throat, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. It's not what it looks like. This is Vanessa, a colleague. We were just what, Jake? I interjected, the pieces slowly falling into place. Don't give me that crap. I'm not an idiot. Vanessa spoke up, her voice sickly sweet. We were just filing the paperwork for my maternity leave, she said, patting her protruding belly. Jake's been so supportive. The words hit me like a freight train. My legs nearly buckled beneath me as the reality sank in. Jake was having an affair, and his mistress was pregnant. I wanted to scream, to unleash the torrent of rage and betrayal swirling within me, but all I could muster was a strangled whisper. How could you? Before he could respond, I turned on my heel and stormed out, the tears streaming down my face. The life I thought I knew had crumbled in an instant, leaving me adrift in a sea of anguish and doubt. I couldn't stop replaying that haunting scene in my mind. Jake's panicked expression, Vanessa's smug smile as she cradled her swollen belly. How could the man who once promised me the world have betrayed me so callously? The memories of our early days together taunted me, a painful reminder of how far we'd drifted. I could still picture Jake down on one knee, his eyes brimming with adoration as he slipped that diamond ring on my trembling finger. Marry me, Emma, he had said, his voice thick with emotion. Let's build something amazing together. In that moment, the world seemed filled with infinite possibilities, our dreams within reach. We were young and in love, ready to take on any challenge side by side. Jake had been my rock, my safe harbor in the turbulent storms of life. Now, as I paced restlessly around our bedroom, the very space we'd once shared felt like a prison cell, suffocating me with its memories. The lavish furnishings that had once symbolized our success now mocked me, reminders of the life I thought we had built together. I sank onto the edge of the bed, burying my face in my hands as the sobs racked my body. What happened to us, Jake? I whispered brokenly into the stillness. His late nights at the office, his constant excuses, the growing distance between us, it all made sense now. While I had poured my heart and soul into supporting his career, he had been sneaking around with that woman. Anger flared within me, burning away the hurt and replacing it with a searing determination. I wouldn't be the one left broken and humiliated. Not this time. With a renewed sense of purpose, I wiped away my tears and reached for my phone. If Jake thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, he was sorely mistaken. I would uncover every sordid detail of his betrayal, and when I did, he would pay dearly for destroying the life we had built. As I dialed my brother Max's number, my hands trembled with a mixture of rage and resolve. Max, I need your help, I said, my voice low and steady. Jake's been having an affair, and I'm going to make him regret the day he ever looked at another woman. The sound of Jake's key turning in the lock made my heart pound with a mixture of dread and anticipation. I steeled myself, determined to confront him about his sickening betrayal. He sauntered in, his expression casual, as if nothing earth-shattering had occurred. Hey, babe, you're up late, he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I recoiled from his touch, bile rising in my throat. Don't you dare babe me, you lying snake, I spat, my hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Jake blinked in surprise, his bravado faltering. What's gotten into you? You know damn well what this is about, I hissed, jabbing an accusing finger at his chest. I saw you today at the municipal office with your little mistress. His face paled, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. Then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out defensively. Emma, you're overreacting. Vanessa is just a colleague, and we were. Save your pathetic excuses, I cut him off, my voice trembling with rage. I'm not an idiot, Jake. I saw the way you were touching her, whispering in her ear like some love-struck teenager. He opened his mouth to protest, but I wasn't finished. And let's not forget the fact that she's pregnant, shall we? Were you ever going to tell me about your little bundle of joy, or were you just going to keep stringing me along like a fool? Jake's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. You don't know what you're talking about, he snapped. Vanessa and I have a professional relationship, nothing more. You're just being paranoid. I let out a humorless laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. Paranoid? You're calling me paranoid after I caught you red-handed with your mistress? Stepping closer, I jabbed a finger into his chest again, my voice low and dangerous. Let me make one thing crystal clear, Jake. I'm not going to sit back and let you humiliate me like this. I want the truth, and I want it now. Who is she, and what's really going on between you two? Jake's jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he might actually come clean. But then his expression hardened once more, and he turned away, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I don't have time for this nonsense. As he stalked towards the bedroom door, I felt a surge of white-hot fury. This isn't over, Jake, I called after him, my voice trembling with rage and determination. Believe me, I'm just getting started. The delicious aroma of Mom's homemade lasagna wafted through the air, but I couldn't bring myself to enjoy the familiar comfort of our family gatherings, not with the weight of Jake's betrayal hanging over me like a dark cloud. As my parents, Brother Max and his wife Sarah, chatted animatedly around the dining table, I found myself picking listlessly at my food, my appetite non-existent. Max must have sensed my distress because he soon excused himself from the conversation and slid into the chair beside me. "You've been awfully quiet tonight, sis," he murmured, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on?" I opened my mouth to brush him off, but the words caught in my throat. Max had always been my confidant, my steadfast ally through life's ups and downs. If anyone could help me make sense of this nightmare, it was him. Taking a deep breath, I poured out the whole sordid tale, catching Jake at the municipal office with Vanessa, the revelation of her pregnancy, and the heated confrontation that followed. As the words tumbled out, tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously, determined not to break down in front of everyone. Max's expression darkened with each revelation, his jaw clenching in anger. "That lying bastard," he growled, slamming his fist on the table with enough force to make the plates rattle. "I'll kill him for what he's done to you." Sarah reached across the table, her eyes shining with sympathy as she gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this." Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances, their faces etched with sadness and concern. "Honey, are you sure about all this?" Dad asked hesitantly. "Maybe there's been some kind of misunderstanding." I shook my head vehemently, my hands curling into fists in my lap. "No, Dad, there's no misunderstanding. I saw it with my own eyes. Jake's been having an affair, and now his mistress is pregnant." A heavy silence fell over the table as the weight of my words sank in. Mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she reached out to cradle my face in her hands. "Never doubt your worth, Emma," she said fiercely. "If that fool can't see the incredible woman he has, then he doesn't deserve you." Max nodded emphatically, his expression resolute. "She's right. You need to gather evidence, build a solid case against him. If he's cheating, you deserve to know the truth and get everything you're entitled to in the divorce." A fierce determination took root within me, hardening my resolve. Jake might have thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, but he was sorely mistaken. With my family's support, I would uncover every last sordid detail of his betrayal, and when I did, he would pay dearly for destroying the life we had built together. "You're right," I said, raising my chin defiantly. "It's time to take that lying snake down once and for all." The sleek black sedan pulled up outside the nondescript apartment complex, and my heart leapt into my throat. This was it, the moment of truth I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. With trembling hands, I killed the engine and stepped out onto the cracked pavement, my gaze fixed on the building's entrance. This was where Jake's mistress lived, the very place he had been sneaking off to for who knows how long. A part of me wanted to turn and run, to bury my head in the sand and pretend this nightmare wasn't real. But the fire of determination burned brighter, fueled by the hurt and rage that had been simmering within me since that fateful day at the municipal office. Squaring my shoulders, I marched towards the entrance, each step propelling me closer to the harsh reality I had been avoiding. The buzz of the intercom made my heart skip a beat, but I pressed the button for Vanessa's apartment with a steadiness that belied my inner turmoil. "Hello?" Her saccharine voice crackled through the speaker. "It's Emma," I responded, my voice surprisingly even. "We need to talk." There was a pregnant pause, and for a moment I thought she might refuse to buzz me in. But then the door clicked open and I stepped inside, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, each step echoing like a death knell in my ears. Finally, I reached Vanessa's door and raised my fist to knock, but the sound of muffled voices from within made me pause. Pressing my ear to the door, I strained to make out the words, my heart pounding in my chest. "Can't keep doing this, Jake," Vanessa's voice filtered through, laced with exasperation. "She's going to find out eventually, and then what?" "She won't." Jake's familiar baritone responded, filled with a confidence that made my blood boil. "Emma's too caught up in her own little world to notice what's really going on." The casual dismissal of our marriage, of everything we had built together, was like a knife through my heart. Hot tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously, channeling my hurt into a simmering rage. Taking a deep breath, I raised my fist and pounded on the door, the sound reverberating through the hallway like a thunderclap. Silence reigned for a heartbeat, and then hurried footsteps approached from the other side. The door swung open, and there stood Jake, his expression a comical mixture of shock and guilt. Vanessa hovered behind him, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "Emma," Jake stammered, his eyes wide with panic. "What are you doing here?" "What does it look like, Jake?" I spat, my voice dripping with venom. "I'm here to see your mistress and the child you've been keeping from me." Vanessa arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her lips curling into a smirk. "It's exactly what it looks like," she purred, resting a possessive hand on Jake's arm. Something inside me snapped at her brazen display, and before I could stop myself, the words tumbled from my lips in a torrent of fury. "You lying, cheating bastard!" I screamed, advancing on Jake with fists clenched. "How could you do this to me, to our family?" Jake backed away, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Emma, please, it's not what it looks like. Let me explain." But I was past the point of listening to his excuses. Reaching into my purse, I withdrew the divorce papers I had prepared earlier and thrust them into his chest. "It's over, Jake," I growled, my voice trembling with rage and finality. "I want a divorce, and I'm going to take you for everything you're worth. Mark my words, you'll regret the day you ever looked at another woman." With those parting words, I spun on my heel and stormed out, my heart racing with a heady mixture of pain and vindictive satisfaction. The battle lines had been drawn, and I would stop at nothing to make Jake pay for his betrayal. The sharp scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as I stepped into William's office, my heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. This was it, the moment I had been steeling myself for since that fateful confrontation with Jake and his mistress. William looked up from his desk, his brow furrowing at the sight of me. "Emma, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Drawing a steadying breath, I sank into the chair opposite him and recounted the whole sordid tale, from catching Jake at the municipal office to the explosive showdown at Vanessa's apartment. With each damning detail, William's expression grew darker, his jaw clenched in barely contained fury. "That lying, manipulative son of a bitch," he growled when I had finished, slamming his fist on the desk with enough force to make the coffee cups rattle. "How dare he do this to you and your daughter?" I flinched at the venom in his voice, a part of me still reeling from the reality of Jake's betrayal. But beneath the hurt, a newfound determination was taking root, fueled by William's righteous anger on my behalf. Reaching into my bag, I withdrew the divorce papers and slid them across the desk towards him. "I want to take him for everything he's worth," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. "He's going to pay for what he's done, no matter what it takes." William nodded grimly, his eyes flashing with a fierce resolve that mirrored my own. "Don't worry, Emma. With the evidence we have, we can turn the tables entirely on that bastard." As he began poring over the paperwork, jotting down notes and muttering under his breath, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. William had been a pillar of strength through the darkest days of my marriage, always offering a sympathetic ear and sage advice. Now, as we delved into the legal minutiae of my divorce case, I found myself leaning on him more than ever. With each damning piece of evidence we uncovered, secret bank accounts, hidden assets, even a potential paternity scandal, The tangled web of Jake's deception grew more intricate and insidious. But with William by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. His fierce determination to see justice done for me and my daughter was like a beacon in the darkness, guiding us through the treacherous waters of the legal system. As the hours ticked by, the walls of William's office seemed to close in around us, cocooning us in a world where only our shared mission mattered. The rhythmic scratching of his pen on paper became a soothing mantra, punctuated by the occasional exclamation of triumph as we unearthed another damning piece of evidence. And through it all, a newfound sense of camaraderie blossomed between us, forged in the fires of shared adversity. As we pored over the documents, our heads bent together in quiet conspiracy, I couldn't help but marvel at the strength of William's conviction, his unwavering belief in the sanctity of justice. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united in our quest to make Jake answer for his betrayal. And as I met William's steady gaze, a glimmer of hope flickered to life within me, a promise that brighter days lay ahead, if only I had the courage to reach out and seize them. The crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves as I pulled into my parents' driveway, my heart heavy with a mixture of trepidation and grim satisfaction. So much had changed since that fateful day at the municipal office, and yet a part of me still clung to the desperate hope that things could be salvaged with Jake. That foolish notion was swiftly extinguished the moment I stepped through the front door and found him slumped on the couch, a pathetic shadow of his former self. His once immaculate suit hung loosely on his frame, his hair disheveled, and his eyes sunken with the weight of his rapidly unraveling life. "Emma," he croaked, struggling to his feet as I entered the living room. "Thank God you're here. We need to talk." I arched an eyebrow, silently appraising his sordid appearance. "Talk about what, Jake? Your mistress leaving you high and dry?" His face twisted in a grimace of pain, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Please, Emma," he implored, his voice a ragged whisper. "I need you back at the company. Everything's falling apart without you." A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I shook my head in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me. After everything you've done, you really think I'd come crawling back to help you?" "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake," he insisted, desperation seeping into his tone. "But we can fix this, Emma. We can make things right again, I swear." The earnestness in his voice almost made me waver, but then I caught sight of the framed photo on the mantelpiece, a frozen moment from happier times, back when our love seemed unbreakable. My jaw clenched as I remembered all the lies, the deceit, the utter disregard he had shown for our family. "Fix this," I echoed, my voice laced with contempt. "You destroyed us, Jake. And for what? A fling with some vapid little tart who couldn't care less about you now that you're broke." His shoulders slumped in defeat, and for a moment he seemed to age a decade before my very eyes. "I don't know what I was thinking," he mumbled, burying his face in his hands. "I've lost everything." A surge of vindictive satisfaction washed over me as I watched him crumble, finally reaping the consequences of his actions. This was the man who had once promised me the world, only to shatter those dreams with his selfish betrayal. "You're damn right. You've lost everything," I spat, advancing on him with eyes blazing. "The company, the house, the life we built together, it's all gone, thanks to your lies and your inability to keep it in your pants." Jake flinched as if I had struck him, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Emma, please, I'm begging you. I need your help to get back on my feet." For a heartbeat, I almost wavered, the old familiar pull of love and loyalty tugging at my heart. But then I remembered the anguish of that confrontation, the cold, hard truth of his infidelity, and my resolve hardened like steel. "You destroyed us," I said, my voice low and unwavering. "Now face the consequences." With those parting words, I turned on my heel and strode out, leaving Jake to wallow in the wreckage of his own making. It was a harsh lesson, but one he had brought upon himself through his callous disregard for the family I had once cherished. As I climbed back into my car and pulled away from the curb, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. Jake's downfall was nearly complete, and soon I would be free to start anew, without the shadow of his betrayal looming over me. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure, but one that filled me with a sense of grim satisfaction. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served. The gentle morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow over the bedroom. As I blinked awake, a sense of peace washed over me, a feeling that had been sorely lacking in the tumultuous months since Jake's betrayal. Beside me, William slept soundly, his features relaxed, and a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I couldn't help but marvel at how far we had come, from the tense early days of my divorce proceedings to the easy intimacy we now shared. Reaching out, I traced the contours of his face with a feather-light touch, my heart swelling with a tenderness I had thought long buried beneath the ashes of my shattered marriage. William had been my rock through it all, a steadfast ally in the fight for justice and a constant reminder that better days lay ahead. As if sensing my touch, he stirred, his eyes fluttering open to meet my gaze. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured, his voice still husky with sleep. I leaned in to press a gentle kiss to his lips, savoring the simple contentment of the moment. "Morning, handsome." Propping himself up on one elbow, William studied me with a fond smile. "You look happy this morning." "I am happy," I replied, the words carrying a weight that seemed to lift a burden from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I feel free. His expression softened, and he reached out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "You deserve to be happy, Emma. After everything you've been through, you and your daughter deserve nothing less than the world." A lump formed in my throat at his words, and I had to blink back the tears that threatened to spill over. How could I have ever doubted fate's plan, thinking that Jake's betrayal was the end of the road? In truth, it had been the start of a new journey, one that had led me straight into the arms of a man who cherished me for who I was, a man who had fought tooth and nail to ensure that I received the justice I deserved. "You know, when I first walked into your office all those months ago, I never could have imagined we'd end up here," I confessed, tracing idle patterns on the sheets that pooled around his waist. William chuckled, that rich, warm sound that never failed to make my heart skip a beat. "Neither could I, but I'm certainly glad we did." Shifting closer, he gathered me into his embrace, his solid warmth a reassuring anchor in the midst of my turbulent emotions. "You're one of the strongest, most resilient women I've ever met, Emma, and I promise from this day forward I'll do everything in my power to make sure you and Lily never have to endure that kind of pain again." His solemn vow hung in the air between us, a poignant reminder of the battles we had weathered and the scars we bore. But in that moment, as I lost myself in the depths of his unwavering gaze, I knew that those scars were a testament to our strength, proof that we had emerged from the ashes of heartbreak stronger and more resolute than ever before. "I know you will," I whispered, sealing my faith with a searing kiss. As our bodies intertwined beneath the rumpled sheets, a new chapter began to unfold, one written in the language of hope, healing, and the undying promise of a future brighter than I could have ever imagined. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly, blissfully free. The shrill ringing of my phone jolted me awake. It was Eve, my daughter-in-law's voice, trembling with distress. "Marjorie, it's Eve. You need to come now. It's about the kids." My heart sank as I rushed to get dressed. I knew something was terribly wrong. Eve and my son Declan had been having problems, but I never imagined it would escalate to a point where the children were involved. 30 minutes later, I pulled up to Declan's suburban home. The porch light was on, and a small figure huddled on the steps, my 14-year-old granddaughter, Lila. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, her face pale and tear-stained. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mom and Dad? They left, just went on a trip and left us here." I gathered her in my arms, her thin frame shivering against the cold night air. "Oh, sweetheart, where's Tess, your sister?" Lila nodded towards the door. "Inside. She has a key." We found Tess, Declan's 16-year-old daughter from his second marriage to Elise, sitting on the kitchen floor. Her eyes were puffy, but she remained stoic, a stark contrast to Lila's fragility. "Tess, are you both all right?" I asked, dreading the answer. She shook her head slowly. "We haven't eaten since yesterday morning. The fridge is empty, and there's no food in the house." A wave of anger washed over me. How could Declan and Elise do this to their own children? I took a deep breath, suppressing the fury simmering within me. "All right, girls, pack a bag each. You're coming home with me." As they gathered their essentials, I surveyed the house, a mess of empty takeout containers and discarded clutter. In the living room, a half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the coffee table, a grim reminder of Declan's increasing struggle with alcoholism. The drive back to my place was silent, save for the occasional sniffle from Lila. I glanced in the rearview mirror, catching Tess's steely gaze. She was putting up a brave front, but I could see the pain flickering behind her eyes. Once we arrived, I ushered them inside, ensuring they were fed and comfortable. As they settled in, I knew that this was just the beginning. I would not let Declan and Elise get away with this neglect. They had crossed a line, and I was determined to fight for the well-being of my grandchildren, no matter the cost. After settling the girls in for the night, I sat in the dimly lit living room, my mind racing. How could Declan have fallen so far? The loving son I had raised, now reduced to a neglectful father, abandoning his own children. A familiar sense of disappointment welled up within me, but this time it was tinged with a newfound fury. "Grandma?" I turned to see Lila standing in the doorway, her eyes puffy and red. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "It's been happening for a while," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The fighting, the drinking. Mom and Dad would leave us alone for days sometimes." My heart broke as she revealed the extent of their suffering. "Oh, sweetheart, why didn't you tell me sooner?" She shrugged, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "We were scared. Dad said if we talked, he'd send us away." I pulled her into a tight embrace, anger boiling inside me. How dare Declan threaten his own children? The man I had raised would never have stooped so low. "You're safe now, Lila," I promised. "I won't let them hurt you or Tess ever again." The next morning I woke early and began making arrangements. First I called Eve, Declan's ex-wife and Lila's mother. Her voice wavered as she apologized profusely for not acting sooner. "I had no idea it was this bad, Marjorie," she said, her words laced with guilt. "If I had known, I would have taken Lila away from that situation in a heartbeat." I assured her that the girls were safe with me, promising to keep her updated on any developments. Next, I reached out to Bill Radley, the family lawyer and a close friend of my late husband. He agreed to meet us later that day to discuss legal options. As the girls ate breakfast, I noticed Tess's guarded demeanor. She barely made eye contact, keeping her responses curt and dismissive. "Tess, honey," I said gently, "I know this is difficult, but I want you to feel comfortable here. You and Lila are family." She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with a mixture of sadness and anger. "My mom, she knew what was happening," Tess muttered. "She just didn't care." My stomach twisted at the realization. Elise, the woman Declan had left Eve for, was just as culpable in this neglect. I reached across the table and squeezed Tess's hand, silently vowing to hold them both accountable. Later that afternoon, Bill arrived, his brow furrowed with concern. As I relayed the details of the past few days, his expression hardened. "Declan and Elise have crossed a line," he said gravely. "Abandoning minors, neglect, potential substance abuse issues. We have grounds to seek an emergency custody order and freeze their assets." I nodded, resolve stealing within me. It was time to take action, not just for the sake of Lila and Tess, but to dismantle the toxic legacy Declan had created. "Do whatever it takes, Bill," I said firmly. "I won't let them get away with this." As he left to set the wheels in motion, I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose, a determination to right the wrongs inflicted upon my grandchildren and restore the honor of our family name. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Bill had sprung into action, filing for an emergency custody order and gathering evidence of Declan and Elise's neglect. Meanwhile, I focused on creating a stable environment for Lila and Tess, ensuring they felt safe and cared for. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Tess spoke up, her voice surprisingly steady. "I know where Mom keeps her spare key to Dad's place," she said, avoiding eye contact. "We could go back and look for proof of what they've been up to." I hesitated, not wanting to traumatize the girls further by revisiting that toxic environment. But Tess had a point. Gathering concrete evidence would strengthen our case. "Are you sure you're up for that, sweetheart?" I asked gently. She nodded, her jaw set in determination. "If it means putting them away for what they did, I'll do it." The next day, we made our way to Declan's house, the silence in the car thick with tension. Tess led us to the side gate, producing a small key from her pocket. Mom always kept a spare in case Dad locked himself out, she explained, her voice emotionless. As we stepped inside, the stale air reeked of cigarette smoke and stale alcohol. The living room was a disaster zone, with empty bottles and discarded takeout containers littering every surface. "This is how it always looked," Lila whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and sadness. I fought back the urge to break down at the sight of my grandchildren's living conditions. Instead, I steeled myself, determined to gather the evidence we needed. We methodically searched the house, taking photos and collecting any incriminating items we could find. In the study, I stumbled upon a stack of unpaid bills and notices from Declan's bank, warning of overdrawn accounts. "He was gambling again," Tess said flatly, her eyes fixed on the paperwork. Mom knew, but she didn't care as long as he kept her in designer clothes. My heart broke for these girls, forced to endure such a toxic environment at the hands of their own parents. Elise's callous disregard for her family's well-being only fueled my determination to see justice served. As we prepared to leave, Lila paused in the doorway of her old bedroom, her eyes welling with tears. "I used to hide in here when they fought," she whispered, clutching a tattered stuffed animal to her chest. "I'd cover my ears and pretend I was somewhere else." Without a word, I pulled her into a tight embrace, silently vowing to never let her feel that way again. These children had been through enough trauma. It was time for their suffering to end. On the drive back, Tess spoke up, her voice laced with a newfound determination. "We have to make them pay for this, Grandma," she said, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. "They don't deserve to get away with how they treated us." I met her gaze in the rearview mirror, nodding solemnly. "Don't worry, sweetheart," I assured her. "They'll face the consequences of their actions. I promise you that." As we pulled into the driveway, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the sake of my grandchildren, I was prepared to go to any lengths necessary to dismantle the toxic legacy Declan and Elise had created, even if it meant tearing our family apart in the process. With the evidence we gathered from Declan's house, Bill assured me we had a solid case against him and Elise. However, as he delved deeper into their financial records, a more sinister truth began to emerge. "Marjorie, I'm afraid the situation is even more dire than we initially thought," Bill said gravely as we met in his office. "It appears Declan has been embezzling funds from the family business for years." I felt the air leave my lungs as the weight of his words sank in. The family business, my late husband's legacy, had been tainted by my own son's greed and deceit. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Bill shook his head solemnly. "Millions, by our estimates. He's been funneling money into offshore accounts, likely to fund his gambling habit and lavish lifestyle with Elise." Anger surged through me, hot and relentless. Not only had Declan neglected his children, but he had also tarnished the very foundation my husband had built with his own hands. "We need to stop him," I said, my jaw clenched. "Freeze his accounts, revoke his access to the business, do whatever it takes to cut him off completely." Bill nodded, already drafting the necessary legal documents. "I'll have our team move swiftly on this, Marjorie. We'll cripple his financial resources before he can make another move." As he outlined the steps we would take, I found myself transported back to a time when Declan was just a boy, innocent, full of promise, and utterly devoted to his father. How had he fallen so far astray? Pushing those thoughts aside, I refocused on the task at hand. Revenge, while not my initial motivation, had become a driving force. Declan had not only betrayed his own children, but had desecrated the very name and legacy he was born into. Over the next few days, Bill and his team worked tirelessly, filing injunctions and freeze orders on Declan's accounts and assets. With each legal maneuver, I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that his ill-gotten empire was crumbling around him. Throughout it all, Lila and Tess remained remarkably resilient. They seemed to draw strength from the knowledge that their suffering would not be in vain, that their father and his wife would face the consequences of their actions. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Tess turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. "Grandma, Can we really take everything from them? She asked, her voice laced with a newfound maturity. I nodded solemnly. Your father has betrayed this family in the worst way imaginable. He doesn't deserve a single penny of what he's stolen, not after what he put you girls through. Lila reached over and squeezed her sister's hand, a silent show of solidarity. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride in their resilience and determination. Good, Tess said, her voice steely. They deserve to lose it all. As the legal proceedings gained momentum, I found myself feeling a sense of vindication. Not just for myself, but for my late husband's legacy. Declan had tarnished everything we held dear, and now he would face the consequences of his actions. With each small victory in the courtroom, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The toxic legacy Declan had created was unraveling, and in its place, a new foundation was being laid. One built on integrity, justice, and the unwavering bond between a grandmother and her beloved grandchildren. With the legal wheels in motion, our next step was to gather irrefutable proof of Declan and Elise's neglect and wrongdoing. Bill had hired a private investigator, a seasoned professional named Frank, to delve deeper into their sordid affairs. We need testimonies, documented evidence, anything that can solidify our case, Bill explained as we met with Frank in his dingy office. No stone unturned. Frank nodded, his weathered face betraying a lifetime of experience in uncovering the darkest of secrets. Don't worry, we'll leave no trail uncovered. These two won't know what hit 'em. Over the next few weeks, Frank's team worked tirelessly, interviewing neighbors, gathering financial records, and even staking out the seedy establishments Declan frequented during his binges. With each new piece of evidence, the full scope of his depravity came into sharper focus. One afternoon, Frank arrived at my doorstep, a grim look on his face. We got 'em, he said, handing me a thick manila envelope. Everything you need to bury those scumbags for good. Inside were damning photographs, witness statements, and a detailed timeline of Declan and Elise's neglectful behavior. There were accounts of the children being left alone for days on end, forced to fend for themselves while their parents indulged in their vices. Neighbors had even called the authorities on multiple occasions, only to have Declan charm his way out of trouble with his silver tongue. As I pored over the evidence, a sickening feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. How could my own flesh and blood have fallen so far? The man I had raised, the loving son who idolized his father, was now little more than a hollow shell consumed by greed and selfishness. But amidst the heartbreak, a steely resolve took root within me. Declan and Elise would face the full weight of their misdeeds, not just for the sake of Lila and Tess, but for every child who had ever suffered at the hands of neglectful parents. With the evidence in hand, Bill wasted no time in filing a comprehensive lawsuit, seeking not only full custody of the girls, but also financial restitution for the embezzled funds and damages. It was a bold move, one that would undoubtedly rattle the foundations of Declan's crumbling empire. As the news of the impending legal battle spread, whispers began to circulate within our social circles. Some expressed shock and disbelief, while others nodded knowingly, as if they had seen this coming all along. But I paid them no mind. My focus was solely on securing justice for my grandchildren. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Lila turned to me, her eyes brimming with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Grandma, do you really think we can win?" she asked, her voice small and fragile. I reached over and took her hand in mine, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Sweetheart, with the evidence we have, there's no way they can wriggle out of this. Your father and Elise are going to face the consequences of their actions. I promise you that." Tess, ever the stoic one, nodded in agreement. "Good. They deserve everything that's coming to them." As the girls retreated to their rooms for the night, I found myself alone with my thoughts. The road ahead would be long and arduous, filled with painful revelations and bitter confrontations. But through it all, one thought kept me grounded. By dismantling the toxic legacy Declan had created, I was paving the way for a brighter future, one where my grandchildren could find healing, redemption, and the love they so desperately deserved. With the lawsuits filed and evidence mounted, the dominoes began to fall swiftly. Bill's team worked relentlessly, leveraging our legal maneuvers to freeze Declan's remaining assets and restrict his access to the family business. Overnight, The empire he had built through deceit and embezzlement crumbled around him. Bank accounts were frozen, properties seized, and his once lavish lifestyle ground to a halt. It was a harsh dose of karma, but one that he had brought upon himself through his own greed and neglect. As the news spread, the reactions from our social circles were varied. Some expressed shock and disbelief, while others nodded knowingly, as if they had seen this implosion coming all along. But for me, the most satisfying response came from an unlikely source: Eve, Declan's ex-wife and Lila's mother. "Marjorie, I can't thank you enough for doing what I couldn't," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given Lila a chance at a normal life, away from that toxic environment." I assured her that protecting the girls was my top priority, and that Declan would face the full weight of his transgressions. With each legal victory, I felt a sense of vindication, not just for myself, but for every child who had ever suffered at the hands of neglectful parents. As the legal proceedings gained momentum, the courts awarded me temporary custody of Lila and Tess. It was a bittersweet moment, as I knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but having them safely under my roof was a relief beyond measure. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Tess turned to me, her eyes brimming with a mixture of gratitude and residual pain. "Grandma, I know this has been hard on you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "but thank you for not giving up on us." I reached over and squeezed her hand, offering her a reassuring smile. "Sweetheart, you and Lila are my world. I would move mountains to keep you both safe and loved." Lila nodded in agreement, leaning her head against my shoulder. In that moment I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose, a determination to create a safe haven for these two remarkable girls, a sanctuary where they could heal and flourish away from the toxicity of their parents' choices. As the legal proceedings intensified, the whispers and rumors swirled around us like a storm. Some voiced their support, while others questioned the validity of our actions. But through it all, I remained steadfast in my resolve, bolstered by the knowledge that I was doing the right thing for my grandchildren. Then, one fateful day, the hammer fell. Declan and Elise were arrested, facing a litany of charges ranging from child neglect and endangerment to fraud and embezzlement. As they were led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction, the architects of their own downfall, finally facing the consequences of their actions. That night, as I tucked Lila and Tess into bed, I couldn't help but marvel at their resilience. These two remarkable girls had endured unspeakable trauma, and yet they remained strong, their spirits unbroken. "It's over, isn't it?" Lila whispered, her eyes heavy with fatigue, but also a newfound sense of peace. I nodded, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. It's finally over." As I left their room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph, not just for myself, but for the legacy my late husband had built. Through perseverance and unwavering determination, I had dismantled the toxic empire Declan had created, and in its place, a new foundation was being laid, one built on love, integrity, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The aftermath of Declan and Elise's arrests should have brought a sense of relief, but instead, a tense calm settled over our household. It was as if we were all holding our breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. That moment came sooner than expected. One morning, a few days after their incarceration, I heard a commotion at the front door. I opened it to find Declan and Elise, both disheveled and visibly agitated, glaring at me with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Where are my kids, Mother?" Declan spat, his words slurred and his eyes bloodshot. "You had no right to take them," Elise chimed in, her voice shrill and accusatory. "This is kidnapping, Marjorie. You're going to regret this." I stood my ground, unflinching in the face of their vitriol. "I had every right, Declan. You and your wife abandoned those girls, left them to fend for themselves while you indulged in your vices." Declan laughed bitterly, a hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "So you think stripping us of our assets and throwing us in jail is going to make you Mother of the Year? You're delusional." Before I could respond, Lila and Tess appeared in the hallway, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anger. Lila immediately shrank back, but Tess stepped forward, her jaw clenched. "You two don't get to play the victim here," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You're the ones who neglected us, who left us alone for days on end, with no food or care." Elise scoffed, her eyes narrowing. Don't act like you're some innocent victim, Tess. You were always a problem child, just like your deadbeat father. The words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, and for a moment I feared Tess might lash out physically. But then her shoulders slumped, and she shook her head slowly. You know what? You're not even worth it, she said, her voice heavy with resignation. You're just a sad, pathetic excuse for a mother. Declan's face contorted with rage, and he took a step forward, his fists clenched. You ungrateful little... Enough, I shouted, positioning myself between him and the girls. You've done enough damage, Declan. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. He opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of approaching sirens cut him off. Moments later, 2 police officers appeared on the doorstep, their expressions grim. Declan Thompson and Elise Franklin, you're in violation of your parole conditions, one of the officers stated. You're both under arrest. As they were led away in handcuffs, Elise turned to me, her eyes blazing with hatred. This isn't over, Marjorie. You'll regret this. But her words rang hollow, a feeble attempt to salvage what little power she had left. In that moment, I knew that the toxic legacy they had created was well and truly dismantled, reduced to nothing more than empty threats and broken promises. Later that night, as Lila and Tess prepared for bed, an uneasy silence hung in the air. I could see the weight of the day's events weighing heavily on them, and my heart ached for the trauma they had endured. Girls, I began, my voice gentle but firm. I know today was difficult, but I want you to know that you're safe here. Your father and Elise can't hurt you anymore. Lila nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know, Grandma. It's just seeing them again, hearing the things they said. Tess reached over and squeezed her sister's hand, offering her a reassuring smile. We've got each other, Lila, and Grandma, that's all that matters now. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming surge of pride and love for these 2 remarkable young women. They had endured unspeakable hardship, and yet they remained resilient, their bonds forged in the crucible of adversity. As they drifted off to sleep, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. The road had been long and arduous, paved with painful revelations and bitter confrontations. But through it all, one constant had remained: the unwavering love and determination of a grandmother willing to fight for her grandchildren, no matter the cost. And as I gazed upon their peaceful faces, I knew that every sacrifice, every battle fought, had been worth it. The toxic legacy that had once threatened to consume us was no more, replaced by a newfound sense of hope and the promise of a brighter future, one built on the unbreakable bonds of family. The days following Declan and Elise's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. As the details of their misdeeds were laid bare in court, the true depths of their depravity became painfully clear. Witness after witness took the stand, recounting harrowing tales of neglect and abuse. Neighbors spoke of the children being left alone for days on end, forced to fend for themselves, while their parents indulged in their vices. Financial experts detailed the intricate web of fraud and embezzlement that Declan had woven, siphoning millions from the family business to fund his gambling addiction and lavish lifestyle. Through it all, Lila and Tess remained remarkably composed, their strength and resilience a testament to the unbreakable bond they shared. Occasionally, I would catch them exchanging a silent glance, a wordless acknowledgement of the nightmare they had endured and ultimately survived. As the trial progressed, the verdicts came down like a hammer. Declan was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and child endangerment, facing a lengthy prison sentence and the complete dissolution of his ill-gotten assets. Elise, his partner in crime, was convicted of child neglect and accessory charges, her once lavish lifestyle reduced to a bitter memory. The sentencing was a somber affair, attended by a small gathering of family and supporters. As Declan was led away in chains, he turned to me, his eyes burning with a mixture of resentment and resignation. "I hope you're happy, Mother," he spat, his words dripping with venom. "You've torn this family apart." I held his gaze, unflinching in the face of his vitriol. "No, Declan, you did that the moment you chose greed and selfishness over your own children." Elise remained silent, her once haughty demeanor replaced by a hollow, haunted expression. As she was escorted from the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. a reminder that even the most vile of souls were once innocent, corrupted by the toxic legacy of their own making. In the aftermath of the trial, a sense of relief washed over our household. The dark cloud that had loomed over us for so long had finally dissipated, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. One evening, as we gathered for dinner, Lila looked up from her plate, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of hope. "Grandma, do you think we can finally move on from all this?" she asked, her voice tinged with a rare vulnerability. I reached across the table and took her hand in mine, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Of course, sweetheart. The road ahead won't be easy, but we'll walk it together, as a family." Tess nodded in agreement, her expression one of quiet determination. We made it through the worst of it. Nothing can break us now. As the weeks passed, a new sense of normalcy began to take root in our lives. The girls thrived in their studies, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they were finally safe, loved, and free from the toxic legacy of their parents' choices. I, too, found solace in the simple joys of our newfound family dynamic. Watching Lila and Tess blossom into confident, resilient young women filled me with a sense of pride and purpose that had been lacking for far too long. On a sunny afternoon, as we sat together in the backyard, Lila turned to me, her eyes bright with a mixture of gratitude and love. "Grandma, I don't know where we'd be without you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave us a second chance, a chance to be a real family." Tess nodded, reaching over to take my hand. "You're the one who showed us what it means to truly love and support each other, no matter what." In that moment, as I looked upon the faces of these two remarkable young women, I knew that every sacrifice, every battle fought, had been worth it. The toxic legacy that had once threatened to consume us was no more, replaced by the unbreakable bonds of family and the promise of a future where love, resilience, and justice would always prevail. As the warm sunlight enveloped us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace, a quiet certainty that the darkest chapters of our lives had been closed and a new, brighter story was just beginning to unfold. There was an unsettling feeling in the air as we all gathered at Mom and Dad's place for our regular family dinner. The usual jovial atmosphere was clouded by an unspoken tension that I couldn't quite put my finger on. As I looked around the table, I noticed furtive glances and strained smiles, a stark contrast to the warm camaraderie we typically shared. It wasn't until after the meal, when we had all retreated to the living room, that the cause of the discomfort became glaringly apparent. My daughter-in-law, Celia, was conversing with my niece, her words dripping with disdain. "Can you believe Eliza still insists on cooking these archaic recipes?" Celia scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's like she's a relic from a bygone era, a mere house ornament, clinging to outdated traditions." Her words felt like a slap across my face, and I could sense the collective intake of breath from the others present. For a moment I was paralyzed, unsure of how to respond to such blatant disrespect. Anger surged through me, but I quickly tempered it, recognizing that lashing out would only further escalate the situation. Instead, I took a deep breath and focused on maintaining my composure, choosing to address the issue at a more opportune time. As the evening drew to a close and our guests began to depart, I found myself lingering in the kitchen, helping my husband, Tom, with the cleanup. His gentle touch on my arm drew my attention, and I met his concerned gaze. "Are you all right, Eliza?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "I know Celia's words stung, but try not to let them get to you." I forced a smile, but my heart was heavy with a newfound realization. My daughter-in-law's disdain for my role as a homemaker had been simmering beneath the surface all along, and her callous remark had merely brought it to a boiling point. As I retired to bed that night, my mind whirled with a multitude of thoughts. Celia's dismissive attitude towards my lifestyle choices had become increasingly apparent, and I couldn't help but wonder if her disrespect extended beyond just words. It was in that moment that I vowed to confront this issue head-on, to stand up for myself and the values I held dear. No longer would I allow Celia's contemptuous behavior to go unchecked. It was time to reclaim my dignity and assert my worth, not just as a homemaker, but as a woman deserving of respect. In the weeks that followed, an uneasy calm settled over our household. Celia's disrespectful comment had left a sour taste, but I chose to temporarily swallow my pride in the hopes of preserving family harmony. That delicate peace, however, was shattered when Jake and Celia approached Tom and me with a proposal that would upend our lives. "Mom, Dad, we've been thinking," Jake began, his arm draped around Celia's shoulders. "With the cost of living these days, it's getting harder for us to save up for our dream of starting a business." Celia nodded eagerly, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "That's why we were wondering if we could move in with you for a while. Your place is so spacious, and it would really help us get our finances in order." My initial reaction was one of hesitation. Having Celia under the same roof, with her thinly veiled contempt for my way of life, felt like a recipe for disaster. But then I looked at Jake, my son, and saw the hopeful expression on his face. "We'd contribute to household expenses, of course," Celia chimed in, as if sensing my reluctance. "And I can help out around the house, too, take some of the burden off you." Her words rang hollow, but I couldn't bring myself to outright deny their request. This was an opportunity to build a stronger relationship with my daughter-in-law and support my son's ambitions. "Of course you're welcome to stay," I heard myself saying, despite the nagging voice in my head warning me of the potential consequences. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as Jake and Celia settled into our home. At first, Celia seemed true to her word, pitching in with household chores and even offering to cook a few meals. But it didn't take long for the cracks to start showing. "Eliza, don't you think it's time to update these recipes?" Celia would comment, wrinkling her nose as I prepared a family favorite. "They're so outdated." Her criticisms extended beyond just my cooking, with frequent jabs at my cleaning methods and general homemaking abilities. "You really should consider hiring a professional cleaning service," she'd say, eyeing the spotless surfaces with disdain. "It's the modern way, you know." Her ingratitude and sense of entitlement only seemed to grow, casting a dark cloud over our once peaceful abode. "Don't let her get to you," Tom would murmur, his hand resting comfortingly on my shoulder as we lay in bed at night. "She's just young and doesn't understand." But his words did little to soothe the growing resentment I felt towards Celia. Her constant belittling of my way of life was grating on my nerves, and I found myself retreating into a shell of silence, biting my tongue to avoid unleashing the torrent of frustration bubbling beneath the surface. It was during one of these tense moments, as I was sorting through the household finances, that I made a startling discovery. Funds that should have been allocated for shared expenses were missing, and upon closer inspection, I realized the money had been diverted into Celia's personal account. Confronting her that evening, I was met with a dismissive wave of her hand and a scoff. "It's just a little something for myself," she sneered, her eyes narrowing. "You wouldn't understand being an obsolete relic and all." Her words stung like a slap across the face, but in that moment, something shifted within me. No longer would I tolerate her disrespect and blatant disregard for our generosity. As I retreated to the sanctuary of my bedroom, a steely resolve took root. It was time to take action, to protect not only my dignity but the very home that Celia seemed intent on undermining. Living under the same roof as Celia was like walking on eggshells. Her disrespect and entitlement seemed to know no bounds, creating a constant undercurrent of tension that permeated every aspect of our daily lives. It was the little things that gnawed at me the most. The way she would wrinkle her nose at the homemade meals I spent hours preparing, dismissing them as outdated. The disdainful glances she cast at the meticulously clean surfaces, suggesting we hire professional help. "Don't you think it's time to update your cleaning routine, Eliza?" she would say, her voice dripping with condescension. "These old-fashioned methods are so inefficient." It took every ounce of self-control to bite my tongue and not lash out in response. Tom, bless his heart, tried his best to diffuse the situations, reminding me that Celia was young and simply didn't understand the value of tradition. But her disrespect wasn't limited to my homemaking abilities. She seemed to take pleasure in undermining my authority in my own home, constantly challenging my decisions and belittling my contributions to the household. "Really, Eliza, do you truly believe you have the right to dictate how we spend our money?" she scoffed one evening, her eyes narrowing as I questioned her recent lavish purchases. You're just a housewife with no real understanding of financial matters. Her words cut deep, and I could feel the anger bubbling within me like a volcano threatening to erupt. But I remained steadfast in my resolve, determined not to stoop to her level and engage in petty arguments. It was during one of these tense moments that the final straw came crashing down. As I was preparing dinner, Celia sauntered into the kitchen, her face twisted into a sneer. "Honestly, Eliza, when are you going to learn that your outdated cooking methods are holding us back?" she said, her voice laced with venom. "We're a modern family now, and it's time you embraced that fact." Something inside me snapped. I slammed the knife down on the cutting board, causing Celia to jump back in surprise. "Enough," I growled, my voice trembling with fury. "This is my home, and I will not stand for your constant disrespect any longer." Celia's eyes widened, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of fear cross her features. But it was quickly replaced by her trademark sneer. "Your home?" she spat back. "Don't delude yourself, Eliza. This is Jake's home, and by extension mine. You're just a relic clinging to a bygone era, desperately trying to retain some semblance of relevance." Her words felt like a physical blow, and I stumbled back, clutching the counter for support. In that moment, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, Celia would never respect me or the life I had built. As she turned on her heel and strutted out of the kitchen, a cold determination settled over me. If she wanted to play dirty, then so be it. I would no longer be the meek, submissive target of her scorn. From that moment on, I vowed to document every insult, every disrespectful comment, and every instance of financial mismanagement. Celia had declared war, and I intended to fight back with everything I had. Over the following weeks, I diligently documented every instance of Celia's disrespectful behavior and financial misdeeds. A thick folder slowly accumulated, filled with irrefutable evidence of her lies, insults, and blatant disregard for our generosity. One evening, as I was updating the records, Tom walked into the study, his brow furrowed with concern. "Eliza, what's going on?" he asked, gesturing to the pile of papers scattered across the desk. "You've been spending so much time in here lately, and I can't help but feel like you're keeping something from me." I took a deep breath, weighing my options. Tom had always been a pillar of support, but I feared involving him might only escalate the already volatile situation with Celia. "It's nothing to worry about," I said, forcing a reassuring smile. "I'm just keeping track of some things, that's all." Tom's gaze narrowed, and I could see the skepticism in his eyes. But before he could press further, the sound of raised voices drifted in from the living room, shattering the tense silence. "What do you mean you took money from the household account?" Jake's voice boomed, thick with anger. "That's not your money to spend, Celia." Celia's shrill response was almost indecipherable, but I caught the gist of her defense. "It's just a little something for myself, Jake. You know how expensive those new boots I wanted were." My heart sank as I realized she had been caught pilfering funds again, using the money meant for shared expenses to indulge her own selfish desires. Tom and I exchanged a knowing glance, and without a word, we made our way to the living room, where Jake and Celia were engaged in a heated argument. "You can't just take money whenever you feel like it, Celia," Jake shouted, his face flushed with anger. "That's not how it works." Celia's eyes narrowed as she caught sight of us, and a twisted smile crept across her lips. "Oh, look who decided to join us," she sneered, her gaze boring into me with undisguised contempt. "The obsolete relic herself, no doubt here to lecture me on the virtues of frugality and tradition." I felt my fists clench involuntarily, but I willed myself to remain calm. This was the perfect opportunity to confront her, to expose her selfish and manipulative behavior once and for all. "Jake," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within me. "This isn't the first time Celia has taken money without our knowledge. I've been documenting her actions, and I have proof of her repeated financial mismanagement and disrespect towards us." Celia's eyes widened in disbelief, and she opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand to silence her. "Don't bother denying it, Celia," I said, my tone firm. "I have everything documented right here." I retrieved the thick folder from the study and placed it on the coffee table, the weight of its contents a damning testament to Celia's deceit. Jake's gaze shifted between us, confusion and hurt etched into his features. "Is this true, Celia?" he asked, his voice trembling with barely contained emotion. For a moment I thought Celia might try to lie her way out of it, but as she met my unwavering stare, she seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," she spat, her lips curled into a sneer. "I took the money. But can you blame me? Living with an obsolete relic like her is suffocating. I needed a little something to make this situation bearable." The venom in her words was palpable, and I felt a chill run down my spine. But beneath the hurt and anger, a newfound sense of determination took root. No longer would I allow Celia to treat me with such blatant disrespect. It was time to take a stand, not just for myself, but for the sanctity of our home and family. The aftermath of Celia's exposed deceit hung heavy in the air, casting a pall over our once peaceful home. Jake, devastated by his wife's betrayal, had retreated into a shell of stunned silence, barely uttering a word as he grappled with the harsh reality. As for Celia, she maintained an air of defiance, her chin tilted defiantly as she brushed past me in the hallways, her eyes burning with undisguised contempt. It was clear she had no intention of admitting wrongdoing or offering any semblance of remorse. In the midst of this turmoil, Tom and I tried our best to carry on with a sense of normalcy, determined not to let Celia's actions disrupt our lives any further. But the strain was palpable, like a taut wire threatening to snap at any moment. It was during one of our weekly family dinners, an event that had once been a cherished tradition, that the fragile truce finally shattered. Jake had invited a few potential investors to discuss his and Celia's business plans, and the mood was tense as we all gathered around the table. As the meal progressed, I couldn't help but overhear snippets of Celia's hushed conversation with one of the guests, her voice dripping with smug confidence. "Once we secure the funding, the first order of business will be to get this place in my name," she said, her eyes flicking dismissively in my direction. "Can't have the dead weight holding us back, if you know what I mean." My heart plummeted as the full weight of her words sank in. Not only had she shown a blatant disregard for our generosity, but she was actively plotting to strip me of the very home I had dedicated my life to building. In that moment, a cold fury coursed through my veins, banishing any lingering doubts I may have harbored. Celia's actions had crossed a line, and I knew I had to take decisive action to protect not only myself, but the sanctity of our family. As the dinner drew to a close and our guests began to filter out, I pulled Jake aside, my hand gripping his arm with a steel-like resolve. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. "In private." Jake's brow furrowed with concern, but he nodded wordlessly, following me into the study where I had amassed my damning dossier on Celia's transgressions. "I overheard Celia tonight," I began, my words measured and precise. "She's planning to try and put this house in her name once they secure funding for their business." Jake's eyes widened, and I could see the flicker of hurt and betrayal flashing across his features. "But why?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "This is our family home, our legacy." I let out a weary sigh, steeling myself for what was to come. "Jake, I'm afraid your wife has shown a complete lack of respect for us and the life we've built here," I said, gesturing to the thick folder on the desk. "I've documented everything, the insults, the lies, the financial misdeeds. It's all here, in black and white." As Jake leafed through the pages, his expression morphing from shock to anger, and finally resignation, I knew there was no turning back. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was prepared to fight with every fiber of my being. "I'm sorry, son," I said, my voice softening ever so slightly, "but I cannot stand by and let Celia tear this family apart. It's time we put a stop to her schemes, once and for all." Jake's gaze met mine, and in that moment I saw a glimmer of understanding, a shared resolve to protect what was ours, no matter the cost. With a wordless nod, we set to work, meticulously crafting our strategy. Celia may have thought she held all the cards, but she was sorely mistaken. I was done playing the meek, submissive victim. This was war, and I intended to emerge victorious, no matter what it took. With each passing day, the tension in our household grew thicker, like a suffocating fog that threatened to choke us all. Celia remained defiant, her smug smirks and dismissive glances a constant reminder of her utter lack of remorse. But beneath her arrogant exterior, I could sense a flicker of unease. She knew I had uncovered her web of deceit, and the walls were closing in around her. For my part, I maintained an aura of calm collectedness, going about my daily routines with the same diligence as always. But behind closed doors, a fierce determination burned within me. Night after night, I pored over the evidence I had meticulously gathered, cross-referencing dates, compiling financial records, and building an airtight case against Celia's misdeeds. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Tom found me, my eyes bleary from hours of scrutinizing bank statements. "Eliza, you need to rest," he said gently, his hand resting on my shoulder. "You're running yourself ragged." I shook my head, my gaze unwavering. "I can't stop now, Tom. Not until I've ensured that Celia can never hurt this family again." Tom's brow furrowed with concern, but he didn't press the issue. He knew better than anyone the depths of my resolve when it came to protecting those I loved. In the ensuing days, I took further steps to fortify my position. Consulting with a trusted lawyer, I laid out the evidence, ensuring that every detail was airtight and legally sound. "You have a strong case," the lawyer had said, her eyes scanning the documents with an air of grim satisfaction. "With proof of financial misconduct and verbal abuse, you could potentially pursue legal action against your daughter-in-law." The thought of dragging our family's dirty laundry through the courts was far from appealing, but I knew I had to keep all options open. Celia had proven herself to be a formidable adversary, and I couldn't afford to leave any stone unturned. Throughout it all, Jake remained a steadfast ally, his eyes growing harder with each new revelation of Celia's duplicity. It was as if the rose-tinted glasses had finally been shattered, revealing the ugly truth he had been blind to for far too long. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said one evening, his voice heavy with remorse. "I should have seen through her lies sooner." I reached out and gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "None of this is your fault, Jake. Celia is a master manipulator, but we're going to stop her once and for all." As the weeks ticked by, I could feel the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. Celia's schemes were unraveling, and it was only a matter of time before the final confrontation. And when that moment arrived, I would be ready. With a steely resolve, I continued to gather my ammunition, every insult, every financial discrepancy meticulously catalogued and laid bare. Celia may have thought she could steamroll her way through our lives, but she had underestimated the quiet strength that lay beneath my gentle exterior. I was a mother, a homemaker, and a protector of all that I held dear, and I would stop at nothing to defend my family, my home, and my honor. The battle lines had been drawn, and the stage was set for the ultimate showdown. Celia's reign of terror was coming to an end, and I would be the one to deliver the final blow. The tension in our household had reached a fever pitch, the air thick with unspoken accusations and barely contained animosity. Celia, for her part, maintained an air of defiance, her smug smirks and dismissive glances a constant reminder of her utter lack of remorse. But I knew her bravado was nothing more than a facade, a flimsy mask to conceal the cracks that were rapidly spreading beneath the surface. She could sense the walls closing in, and her desperation was palpable. It was during a large family gathering, one of those rare occasions where the entire clan had assembled, that the final confrontation unfolded. As guests mingled and laughter filled the air, I caught sight of Celia huddled in a corner, her expression one of barely concealed contempt as she surveyed the festivities. Taking a deep breath, I steeled my resolve and approached her, the weight of the evidence I had gathered feeling like a lead weight in my hands. "Celia," I said, my voice low but firm, "we need to talk." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might refuse. But something in my unwavering gaze must have given her pause, because she nodded curtly and followed me into a nearby study, away from prying eyes and ears. Once the door was closed, I wasted no time in laying out the damning evidence before her. "Financial records, witness statements, recordings of your own words," I said, gesturing to the stack of documents. "It's all here, Celia. Irrefutable proof of your deceit, your disrespect, and your blatant disregard for our family." Celia's lips curled into a sneer, but I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes as she leafed through the pages, her hands trembling ever so slightly. "So what?" she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "You think a pile of papers is going to change anything?" I leveled my gaze at her, my resolve unwavering. "This isn't just about papers, Celia. This is about the damage you've inflicted on our family, the trust you've shattered, and the disrespect you've shown to our home and our way of life." Celia opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing her. "Don't bother denying it," I said, my voice hardening. "I have everything documented, every lie, every insult, every penny you've pilfered for your own selfish desires." Celia's eyes widened, and for a moment she seemed at a loss for words. But her shock quickly gave way to anger, her face flushing a deep crimson. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "You think you can just waltz in here and accuse me like some kind of sanctimonious matriarch?" I held my ground, unflinching in the face of her rage. "I'm not accusing you, Celia," I said, my tone firm but measured. "I'm simply presenting the facts, the undeniable truth that you've been so desperate to conceal." Celia's lips parted, no doubt to unleash another torrent of venom. But before she could speak, the study door swung open, and Jake stepped inside, his expression a mix of hurt and anger. "Is it true, Celia?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you really do all of these things?" Celia's gaze darted between us, her eyes wild and desperate. For a moment, I thought she might try to deny everything, to spin yet another web of lies. But then her shoulders slumped and the fight seemed to drain out of her. "Yes," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "It's all true." The silence that followed was deafening, a heavy pall settling over the room as the weight of her admission sank in. Jake's face crumpled, his features etched with a pain that cut me to the core. Without a word, he turned and left the room, the sound of his retreating footsteps echoing like a death knell. Celia and I were left alone, the air thick with tension and unspoken recriminations. "I hope you're happy now," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "You've destroyed everything." But as I looked at her, I felt no sense of triumph or satisfaction. Instead, a strange sense of pity washed over me, for this woman who had allowed her own greed and entitlement to blind her to the true meaning of family. "No, Celia," I said, my voice heavy with resignation. "You did this to yourself, and now you have to face the consequences." With those words, I turned and left the study, leaving Celia to grapple with the ruins of her own making. The battle had been won, but at what cost? As I rejoined the festivities, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hollowness, a realization that no amount of vindication could undo the damage that had been done. But as I caught sight of Jake, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted, I knew that this was just the beginning. The road to healing would be long and arduous, but we would walk it together, as a family. And this time, there would be no room for deceit or disrespect. This time, we would rebuild our home on a foundation of truth, love, and unwavering strength. In the aftermath of Celia's explosive exposure, our once peaceful home became a battleground of raw emotions. The air was thick with tension, each hushed conversation and furtive glance a painful reminder of the trust that had been shattered. Jake retreated into a shell of stunned silence, his eyes haunted by the weight of his wife's betrayal. He would spend hours locked away in his room, emerging only for brief, wordless encounters before retreating once more into his self-imposed exile. As for Celia, she maintained a defiant front, her chin tilted defiantly as she packed her belongings. But beneath her bravado, I could sense the flicker of shame and regret, a silent acknowledgement of the devastation she had wrought. "I hope you're happy now," she spat as she brushed past me in the hallway, her eyes burning with undisguised contempt. But the truth was, I felt no sense of satisfaction or triumph. Instead, a hollow ache settled in the pit of my stomach, a realization that no amount of vindication could undo the damage that had been done. In the days that followed, Celia's departure left a gaping void in our household. The weight of her absence hung heavy, a constant reminder of the fractured bonds that had once held us together. It was during one of these somber evenings, as Tom and I sat in the dimly lit living room, that the silence was finally broken. "I'm sorry, Mom," Jake's voice drifted in from the doorway, thick with emotion. "I should have seen through her lies sooner." My heart ached at the sight of my son, his shoulders slumped with the weight of his guilt and hurt. Without hesitation, I rose from my seat and enveloped him in a tight embrace, my fingers gently stroking his hair as he let out a shuddering breath. "None of this is your fault, Jake," I murmured, my voice steady despite the torrent of emotions swirling within me. "Celia was a master manipulator, and she preyed on your trust and love." Jake nodded wordlessly, his face buried in the crook of my neck. In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a steely determination to guide my son through this storm and help him rebuild the ruins of his shattered dreams. The days that followed were a constant exercise in patience and perseverance. Jake's wounds ran deep, and the road to healing was paved with setbacks and emotional outbursts. But through it all, Tom and I remained steadfast pillars of support, offering unwavering love and understanding. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the shadows began to lift. Jake's smiles grew more frequent, his laughter echoing through the halls like a long-forgotten melody. He began to embrace his passions once more, pouring his energy into his work and rekindling the dreams that Celia had so callously trampled. As for me, a profound shift had taken place within. The battle with Celia had tested the depths of my strength and resilience, forcing me to confront the harsh realities of a world that often dismissed and devalued the role of a homemaker. But in the end, it was that very role that had proven to be my greatest asset, the bedrock upon which I had built a fortress of unwavering love and devotion to my family. As I watched Jake blossom once more, his confidence and zest for life reignited, I felt a sense of pride and validation that transcended any societal judgment or outdated notion of what it meant to be a woman. I was a mother, a protector, and a warrior in my own right. And through the fires of adversity, I had emerged stronger, more resolute in my conviction that the true measure of a person lay not in their career or societal status, but in the depth of their love and the strength of their character. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was abundantly clear. Our family had been forged anew, tempered by the flames of hardship and bound by an unbreakable bond of love, respect, and resilience. As I looked ahead to the future, I did so with a sense of hope and determination, secure in the knowledge that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together as a united front, forever strengthened by the ties that bind. The words Eric spat out stung like venom, each syllable dripping with disdain. "I've had enough. She's just a lazy burden. You failed as a mother, raising her to be this useless." My heart sank as I watched Abby's fragile form tremble, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. How could any decent human treat a pregnant woman, their own wife, with such cruelty? "She's your wife, Eric," I cried out, barely containing my rage. "Pregnant with your child. What kind of man are you?" Abby flinched at my raised voice, her hands instinctively cradling her swollen belly. I wanted nothing more than to shield her from this monster I once trusted with my daughter's well-being. Eric sneered, his features twisted into an ugly mask of contempt. Some man I turned out to be, stuck with this pathetic excuse for a wife. I should have known better than to marry someone so weak and useless. Each venomous word felt like a physical blow, and I struggled to maintain my composure. How had things spiraled so catastrophically? Where had I gone wrong in raising Abby to end up with such a vile creature? As a single mother, I had poured every ounce of my being into providing Abby with a loving, supportive home after her father's untimely death. We had been a team, navigating life's challenges together, and I had reveled in watching her blossom into a kind, intelligent young woman. Yet, somewhere along the way, I had failed to instill in her the strength to recognize and reject such blatant emotional abuse. The signs had been there, subtle at first, but I had been too blinded by my desire for Abby's happiness to see the truth. Now, as I watched her shrink under Eric's withering gaze, I knew I had to take action. No child of mine would ever suffer such cruelty, not while I still drew breath. "Get out of my house, Eric," I hissed, mustering every ounce of courage I possessed. "And if you ever come near my daughter or grandchild again, I swear to God, you'll regret the day you were born." As the door slammed shut behind Eric's retreating form, I felt the weight of years past bear down upon me. Raising Abby alone after her father's passing had been the greatest challenge of my life, but also my proudest achievement. Those early years were a blur of sleepless nights, juggling work and motherhood with an almost manic determination. Yet, through it all, Abby had been my constant source of joy and motivation. Her bright smile and infectious laughter had been the balm that soothed my weariest days. I reminisced about the times we'd spend evenings cuddled on the couch, reading her favorite storybooks or watching her beloved Disney movies. Even as she grew older, our bond only strengthened, and I relished every moment we shared. Abby had been a shy, introverted child, often preferring the company of her books to that of her peers. I had worried at times that her quietness might impede her ability to form meaningful connections later in life. But as she blossomed into a beautiful young woman, I saw her confidence grow, her warmth and kindness drawing friends and admirers alike. It was through one such friend that Abby met Eric, the man who would ultimately become her undoing. At first he had seemed charming, attentive, and supportive, everything a mother could hope for in her daughter's partner. I had been foolishly blind to the warning signs, so desperate was I for Abby to find happiness. "He's such a nice young man, Mom," Abby had gushed, her eyes alight with infatuation. "He really listens to me and makes me feel understood in a way I've never experienced before." Foolishly, I had believed her, allowing myself to be swayed by Eric's polished facade and empty platitudes. How I wished I could go back and shake some sense into my naive younger self. The first crack in Eric's mask appeared mere months into their marriage. Abby confided in me about his occasional bouts of anger, his cutting remarks that left her feeling small and inadequate. I had brushed it off as newlywed growing pains, assuring her that all couples experienced rough patches. But the emotional abuse only escalated, until Abby found herself trapped in a cycle of gaslighting and manipulation, her once vibrant spirit dimming with each passing day. By the time she discovered her pregnancy, she was but a shell of her former self, terrified and desperate for an escape. Yet, even as I cradled her trembling form in my arms, soothing her frantic sobs, I could never have anticipated the depths of Eric's depravity. The man who had once sworn to cherish and protect my daughter had become her own personal demon, tormenting her with cruel words and indifference. As I tended to Abby's needs, my rage toward Eric festered, a slow-burning ember that threatened to erupt into an all-consuming inferno. He would pay for what he had done, of that I was certain. No one harmed my family and walked away unscathed. Abby's haunted gaze bore into me, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of torment condensed into a single, heart-wrenching moment. Each trembling word that spilled from her lips felt like a dagger piercing my soul. He wouldn't let me rest, Mom. No matter how sick I felt or how much my body ached, Eric demanded that I keep up with all the household chores. She paused, drawing a shuddering breath. He said it was my duty as his wife, that I was just being lazy and selfish. Rage surged through my veins, an all-consuming fire that threatened to engulf me. How dare that vile excuse for a human treat my daughter, his own pregnant wife, with such callous disregard? "Did he not see how much you were suffering?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I fought to maintain my composure. Abby shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He didn't care, Mom. All he cared about was his own convenience, his own needs. I was just a burden to him, an inconvenience to be endured." The mental image of my strong, vibrant daughter, reduced to a mere servant in her own home, denied even the basic compassion owed to an expectant mother, twisted like a knife in my gut. Eric's cruelty knew no bounds. I tried to reason with him, to make him understand how difficult this pregnancy was for me, Abby continued, her voice wavering. But he just brushed me off, telling me I was being dramatic and oversensitive. I pulled her into a fierce embrace, cradling her against me as the sobs racked her frail form. "Shh, baby, it's okay. You're safe now. That monster can't hurt you anymore." But even as I uttered those words, I knew they rang hollow. Eric's poison had seeped too deep, leaving invisible scars that would take far longer to heal than any physical wound. "He left me here, Mom," Abby whispered, her voice thick with anguish. "He said he was done with me, that I was no longer his problem. He just abandoned me, like I was nothing." White-hot fury coursed through me, threatening to choke out all rational thought. How could any man, any human being, treat the mother of his unborn child with such utter disdain? In that moment, a profound shift occurred within me, a maternal instinct ignited with the force of a supernova. Eric had awoken a primal, protective rage that would not be sated until he paid for his sins in full. "Listen to me, Abby," I said, grasping her shoulders and forcing her to meet my gaze. "That bastard will never lay a finger on you or my grandchild again. I swear on my life I will not rest until he gets what's coming to him." Abby's eyes widened, a flicker of hope kindling amidst the despair. But how, Mom? He's so powerful, so influential. He'll just bury us with his wealth and connections. A grim smile tugged at my lips as I brushed away the tears streaking her cheeks. Leave that to me, sweetheart. I may be just a single mother, but I'm also a force to be reckoned with when it comes to protecting my family. With steely resolve, I vowed to myself that Eric Sterling would soon learn the true depth of a mother's wrath. His reign of terror was over, and the wheels of karma were already in motion. In the days that followed, my sole focus became helping Abby heal from the emotional trauma inflicted by that monster she once called her husband. I enlisted the aid of our neighbors, Megan and Paul Collins, who had become like family over the years. Megan, a warm-hearted soul with an unwavering moral compass, took Abby under her wing, providing a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. Her empathy and kindness were like a soothing balm, slowly mending the gaping wounds in Abby's psyche. Paul, a respected psychologist, offered his professional expertise, guiding Abby through weekly therapy sessions designed to help her process the abuse and rebuild her shattered self-esteem. His gentle yet firm approach gradually coaxed her out of the shell she had retreated into, allowing her true strength to resurface. With their support, I witnessed a remarkable transformation in my daughter. The haunted look in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a glimmer of determination that grew brighter with each passing day. Slowly but surely, the vibrant, spirited young woman I had raised emerged from the ashes of Eric's cruelty. As Abby's due date approached, I made the difficult decision to take a temporary leave from my job, putting my career on hold to focus entirely on her well-being. Money would be tight, but no sacrifice was too great when it came to ensuring the safety and happiness of my family. Megan and Paul rallied around us, offering not only emotional support, but also practical assistance. Megan helped with household chores and meal preparations, while Paul kept a watchful eye on Abby's mental state, adjusting her therapy as needed. Through it all, the mere thought of Eric's name ignited a simmering rage within me. The knowledge that he remained free, untouched by the consequences of his actions, was a festering wound that refused to heal. But I bided my time, channeling my anger into providing Abby with the love and care she so desperately needed. Vengeance could wait. My daughter's recovery took precedence over all else. The day Abby went into labor, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. As I held her hand and coached her through each contraction, I marveled at her resilience, her determination to bring new life into the world despite the darkness she had endured. When our beautiful granddaughter, Grace, finally arrived, it was as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. Cradling her tiny, perfect form, I felt a surge of hope and purpose flood through me. This innocent child would never know the pain and fear that her mother had experienced. I would ensure it, no matter the cost. In that sacred moment, with Abby beaming down at her newborn daughter, a silent vow echoed through my soul. Eric Sterling would pay dearly for the suffering he had inflicted upon us. The wheels of karma were already in motion, and his reckoning would be both swift and merciless. For now, though, I allowed myself to bask in the warmth of new life, cherishing the bond between mother and child that Eric had so callously disregarded. His day of reckoning would come, but for the moment, all that mattered was the love and joy radiating from Abby's exhausted yet radiant smile. The first time Eric stepped foot in the hospital room, a mere 3 days after Grace's birth, the air seemed to crackle with tension. Abby visibly shrank back into the pillows, clutching our precious bundle protectively to her chest. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, positioning myself between him and the bed, in a protective stance. Eric sneered, his cold eyes sweeping over Abby with disdain. "I'm here to see my child, of course. Or did you think you could keep her from me?" "Your child?" I scoffed, barely containing my rage. "You forfeited any right to call her that the moment you abandoned her mother in her hour of need." His jaw tightened, but he made no move to approach, clearly sensing the unwavering resolution in my stance. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Abby, his voice dripping with condescension. "Well, aren't you going to introduce me to my daughter, or are you too useless to even manage that?" Abby flinched as if struck, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that moment, I saw the fear and trauma etched into every line of her face, the scars left by Eric's emotional abuse running deeper than any physical wound. Before I could respond, Megan's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. "That's enough, Eric. Your appalling behavior has gone too far." Spinning around, I found Megan standing in the doorway, her usually warm features set in a mask of steely determination. Paul hovered behind her, his expression equally resolute. "Abby has no obligation to subject herself or her child to your toxic presence," Megan continued, her words laced with venom. "Not after the way you've treated her." Eric's lip curled in a sneer as he turned to face our allies. "This is none of your concern. It's a family matter, and I'll thank you to stay out of it." Paul stepped forward, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by a cold, authoritative presence that brooked no argument. "On the contrary, Eric, it very much is my concern. As your superior at the firm, I can't ignore the clear evidence of your abusive behavior toward your wife and child." A flicker of unease crossed Eric's face, but he quickly masked it with a veneer of arrogance. "You have no proof, just the hysterical ramblings of a hormonal woman." "Don't I?" Megan countered, producing a thick manila folder from her bag. "I've been documenting your actions for months, Eric. Every cruel word, every demeaning insult, every instance of emotional and psychological abuse, it's all here, laid out in excruciating detail." Eric's confident facade crumbled as he stared at the damning evidence in Megan's hands. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, a realization that his carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling. "You'll never make those accusations stick," he blustered, but the waver in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Paul fixed him with an unwavering stare. "I wouldn't be so sure about that. With the evidence we have, coupled with Abby's testimony, you'll be lucky to avoid criminal charges, let alone keep your job." A heavy silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the soft coos of the newborn Grace, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around her. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude for the people who had rallied to our defense. As Eric slouched out of the room, his arrogance finally punctured. I knew that the wheels of karma had been set in irreversible motion. His reign of terror was nearing its end, and he would soon face the consequences of his actions. Turning back to Abby, I saw a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes, a spark of determination that had been dormant for far too long. With the support of our loved ones, we would weather this storm and emerge victorious, our family bond stronger than ever before. 3 months after Grace's birth, the fragile peace we had cultivated was shattered by Eric's unexpected arrival. One moment, Abby and I were cooing over Grace's latest milestone, and the next, his thunderous pounding echoed through the house. "Open up, Abby!" he bellowed, his voice laced with fury. "You can't keep me from my daughter forever!" Abby tensed, her arms tightening protectively around Grace's tiny form. The fear in her eyes cut me to the core, a stark reminder of the emotional trauma she had endured. "Stay here," I whispered, pressing a reassuring kiss to her forehead before rising to confront the source of our torment. Eric's face was twisted into an ugly sneer as I swung open the door, his eyes blazing with a dangerous cocktail of rage and entitlement. "What do you want, Eric?" I demanded, positioning myself squarely in the doorway to block his path. "I'm here for my wife and child," he spat, attempting to push past me. "This little game of yours has gone on long enough." I stood my ground, unflinching in the face of his aggression. "Abby is no longer your wife, and you have no claim over that innocent child. Not after the way you've treated them." His nostrils flared, and for a moment I braced myself for an explosive outburst. But then a sly grin spread across his features, sending a chill down my spine. "You think you can keep me away with some pathetic little restraining order?" he sneered. "I have resources you can't even begin to imagine. One word from me, and your precious Abby's life will become a living hell." Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I wouldn't be so sure about that, Eric." Paul stepped into view, his expression a mask of cold fury. Beside him stood Megan, her steely gaze fixed on Eric with an intensity that could have melted steel. "What's this?" Eric scoffed, his bravado faltering slightly. "You brought your little posse for backup?" "They're here to ensure you face the consequences of your actions," Paul stated, his voice laced with barely contained contempt. "Actions that have not gone unnoticed at the firm." Eric paled, the realization of his precarious position dawning on his features. "You can't touch me. I'm too valuable to the company." "On the contrary," Paul countered, producing a thick manila folder from his briefcase. "Your behavior has been meticulously documented, Eric. Verbal abuse, intimidation, unethical business practices. The list goes on and on." With each accusation, Eric's composure crumbled further, his mask of arrogance slipping to reveal the desperation lurking beneath. "You can't prove any of that," he blustered, but the waver in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Megan stepped forward, her expression one of grim satisfaction. "We have more than enough evidence to not only terminate your employment but also pursue legal action for the emotional and psychological trauma you've inflicted on Abby." Eric's eyes darted between us, panic setting in as he realized the depth of the hole he had dug for himself. "This isn't over," he snarled, his face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, all of you." But even as he hurled his empty threats, I could see the defeat etched into every line of his face. The once powerful man who had held us all in his thrall was reduced to a pathetic shell, his carefully constructed facade crumbling to dust. As Eric retreated, his parting words ringing hollow in his wake, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The nightmare was finally drawing to a close, and justice would soon be served. Turning back to Abby, I found her gazing at me with a mixture of awe and gratitude, her arms cradling our precious Grace with a renewed sense of confidence. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front forged in the fires of adversity. Eric's reign of terror was over, and our family's future burned brighter than ever before. In the days following Eric's confrontation, a palpable shift occurred, as if the universe itself was righting the wrongs he had committed. Paul's intervention at the firm proved to be the catalyst that unleashed a torrent of long-buried allegations against Eric. One by one, former colleagues' subordinates came forward, emboldened by the knowledge that their voices would finally be heard. Tales of verbal abuse, intimidation tactics, and unethical business practices soon flooded the company's inboxes, painting a damning portrait of Eric's true character. Within a week, the once untouchable executive found himself unceremoniously dismissed, his illustrious career reduced to ashes by the weight of his own misdeeds. The news spread like wildfire, and Eric's reputation went up in flames, his carefully cultivated image of success crumbling under the intense scrutiny. As the professional fallout escalated, Megan and Paul worked tirelessly to build an airtight legal case against Eric. Abby's testimony, coupled with the mountain of evidence they had accumulated, left little room for doubt or equivocation. When the divorce proceedings finally commenced, it was a mere formality. Eric's lawyers, sensing the futility of their position, advised him to accept the terms and avoid further public humiliation. In the end, Abby emerged victorious, awarded sole custody of Grace and a sizable settlement that would ensure their financial security for years to come. A restraining order was swiftly issued, severing Eric's ability to inflict any further harm upon our family. As the gavel fell sealing Eric's fate, I watched him closely, searching for any flicker of remorse or contrition. But his expression remained a mask of defiance, his eyes burning with barely restrained fury. It wasn't until the courtroom had emptied, leaving only Eric and his legal team behind, that the facade finally cracked. Megan, ever the vigilant observer, witnessed the moment when Eric's bravado shattered, his shoulders slumping in defeat as the full weight of his transgressions bore down upon him. "He broke down, Sarah," she recounted later, her voice tinged with a hint of pity. "All the bluster and arrogance drained away, and he just crumpled." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But any hint of sympathy I might have harbored was quickly extinguished by the memory of Abby's haunted eyes, the trauma she had endured at Eric's hands. He had brought this reckoning upon himself through his own despicable actions, and he would receive no quarter from me. As the dust settled and the legal battles faded into memory, Eric's life spiraled into a tailspin of public disgrace and financial ruin. His once formidable wealth evaporated, consumed by legal fees and the settlement he was forced to pay Abby. Word of his misdeeds spread like wildfire, rendering him virtually unhireable in his chosen profession. Gone were the days of wealth and influence, replaced by a cruel reality of his own making. Through it all, Abby blossomed. her confidence and self-assurance growing with each passing day. The weight of Eric's oppression had been lifted, and she was finally free to embrace her true potential, unencumbered by the shackles of his abuse. As I watched her thrive, reveling in the joys of motherhood and rediscovering her passions, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction settle over me. The wheels of karma had turned, and Eric Sterling had reaped the bitter harvest he had sown through his cruelty. Justice had been served, but more importantly, our family had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. The nightmare was over, and a new chapter of healing and growth awaited us, untainted by the specter of Eric's malice. With Eric's toxic influence finally excised from our lives, a profound sense of peace and renewal washed over us. It was as if a dark cloud had lifted, allowing the warmth of hope and possibility to shine through once more. Abby, buoyed by her legal victory and the unwavering support of our loved ones, blossomed before my very eyes. The haunted, fragile woman who had sought refuge on my doorstep all those months ago was replaced by a radiant, self-assured mother, her eyes sparkling with a newfound strength and determination. Grace, our precious little ray of sunshine, thrived in the loving, nurturing environment we had created for her. Each milestone, every giggle and babbled word was a poignant reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of a mother's love to overcome even the darkest of circumstances. Megan and Paul remained steadfast pillars of support, their friendship and guidance invaluable as we navigated this new chapter of our lives. Megan, ever the voice of reason, offered sage advice on everything from childcare to personal growth, while Paul continued to provide Abby with the therapeutic tools she needed to heal from the emotional scars of her ordeal. As for me, I found solace in the knowledge that my unwavering devotion to my family had been vindicated. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, and the battles fought had all been worth it to ensure the safety and well-being of my loved ones. With Eric's influence effectively neutralized, we were free to rebuild our lives on our own terms, unencumbered by the weight of his toxic presence. Abby, emboldened by her newfound independence, began exploring career opportunities, determined to provide a stable and secure future for Grace. I, too, found myself reevaluating my priorities, realizing that my dedication to my job had often come at the expense of cherished moments with my family. Retirement, once a distant dream, suddenly seemed within reach, and I began to contemplate the prospect of devoting my golden years to the pure, unadulterated joy of being a doting grandmother. Through it all, the shadow of Eric's cruelty loomed, a constant reminder of the darkness we had overcome. Yet, rather than allowing it to consume us, we channeled that experience into a renewed appreciation for the bond that held our family together. Abby, in particular, seemed to draw strength from the knowledge that she had not only survived, but emerged victorious from her ordeal. The once meek, timid girl who had been so easily cowed by Eric's intimidation tactics had blossomed into a fierce, resilient woman, her spirit tempered by the fires of adversity. "I won't let him define me anymore, Mom," she declared one evening as we sat together, basking in the warmth of Grace's infectious giggles. "He tried to break me, but in the end he only made me stronger." In that moment I felt an immense surge of pride, not just for Abby's perseverance, but for the unwavering love and support that had carried us through the darkest of times. Our family had been tested, stretched to the limits of endurance, but we had emerged on the other side, battered yet unbroken. As the summer sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, I found myself filled with a profound sense of gratitude. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was abundantly clear. No matter what challenges lay before us, we would face them together, a united front forged in the crucible of adversity. Eric Sterling's reign of terror was but a distant memory, and the future burned bright with the promise of new beginnings and endless possibilities. I stood there frozen as the words I had just overheard replayed in my mind like a broken record. Dean's voice, usually so warm and comforting, now felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "Hey, Elise, I can't wait to see you later tonight." Who was Elise? And why did his tone sound so intimate, so suggestive? A wave of nausea washed over me as the pieces started to come together. Dean emerged from the study, his expression shifting from casual to panicked when he saw me standing there. Mira, honey, you're back early. How long have you been there? I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Long enough, I managed to choke out. Who is Elise? He paled, his eyes darting away from mine. It's not what you think, he began, but I cut him off. Don't insult me, Dean. I heard the way you spoke to her, the way you sounded. I trailed off, the implications too painful to voice. Desperation crept into his voice as he stepped toward me, hands outstretched. Mira, please, let me explain. But I had heard enough. Without a word, I turned and walked out the door, my mind reeling. How could the man I was supposed to marry in just a few short weeks be having an affair? The man my own brother had vouched for, insisting he was a perfect match for me? As I drove aimlessly, hot tears streamed down my cheeks. I had always prided myself on being a strong, independent woman, but in that moment I felt utterly betrayed and alone. The future I had so carefully planned lay in tatters around me. But then something shifted inside me. A fire ignited, fueled by anger and a newfound determination. I would not be the victim in this story. Dean had made his choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. I wiped away my tears and took a deep breath. This was not the end, but the beginning of something new. A chance to reclaim my power and show the world, and Dean, just how strong I really was. After that fateful day, I tried to act normal around Dean, but it was almost impossible. Every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had betrayed my trust in the most despicable way. Still, I knew I had to keep up appearances until the pre-wedding celebration I had planned. That was when I would expose his lies in front of everyone. Hey, babe, Dean said one evening as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, his voice dripping with false affection. Is everything okay? You've seemed a little off lately. I forced a smile, fighting back the surge of anger that threatened to spill over. Of course, everything's fine. Just a bit stressed with all the wedding prep, that's all. He reached across the table and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. Don't worry, it'll all be worth it in the end. I can't wait to make you my wife. The words made me feel physically ill. How dare he act so caring and loving when he was sneaking around with that Elise woman behind my back? Later that night, as Dean was getting ready for bed, his phone pinged with a new message notification. Before he could check it, I snatched it up, my heart pounding. Hey, that's private, he protested, trying to grab it from me. But I had already seen enough. The message preview read, Can't wait to see you tonight, handsome. I looked up at him, fury blazing in my eyes. So who's Elise again? Just a work friend, right? Dean's face turned ashen. Mira, I can explain. Save it, I spat, throwing his phone back at him. I'm done with your lies and excuses. He reached for me, desperation etched on his features. Please, baby, let's talk about this. But I was already storming out of the room, not wanting to be anywhere near him a moment longer. How could I have been so blind? So naive? I had always prided myself on being a strong, independent woman who didn't need a man to be happy. But Dean had wormed his way into my life, charming me with his smooth words and good looks, making me believe that he was different, that we were meant to be together. Well, no more. From that moment on, I vowed that I would be the one calling the shots. Dean's days of playing me for a fool were over. He wanted to see just how strong I could be. He was about to find out. After my confrontation with Dean, I knew I needed proof of his affair if I was going to expose him at the pre-wedding celebration. So I did what any good event planner would do. I gathered intel. Using some discreet tracking tricks I'd picked up over the years, I followed Dean one night when he claimed to be going to a work dinner. Sure enough, he ended up at a fancy restaurant downtown, waiting at the bar area. A few minutes later, a tall, slender woman with long blonde hair walked in and greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. My blood boiled as I watched them being seated at a cozy corner table, their heads leaning in close as they talked and laughed intimately. This had to be Elise, the woman Dean had been carrying on with behind my back. I considered bursting in and confronting them right then and there, but I held back. I needed to keep my cool if I was going to pull off my big reveal at the party. So I gritted my teeth and watched as Dean and his mistress carried on their sickening charade over a candle-lit dinner, feeding each other bites of food and giggling like love-struck teenagers. Finally, they paid the check and left, walking hand in hand to Dean's car. I followed at a safe distance until they pulled up to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. I felt like vomiting as I realized what was happening, but I forced myself to stay and wait it out. Hours later, Dean finally emerged alone, looking thoroughly disheveled. I tailed him until I was certain he was heading home before breaking off and returning to my own place, my mind racing. The next morning, Dean acted as if nothing had happened, greeting me with a kiss and asking what I wanted for breakfast. I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming at him, from unleashing all the pent-up rage and disgust I felt. Actually, I was thinking we could go out, I said with forced cheerfulness, to celebrate the upcoming wedding and all. His eyes lit up, the fool. That's a great idea, babe. Where did you want to go? I gave him a sly smile. Oh, I have the perfect place in mind. As we headed out later that night, I led Dean to the same seedy motel where I had seen him the night before with Elise. He furrowed his brow in confusion as we pulled into the parking lot. Mira? What are we doing here? I turned to face him, letting my mask of calm finally drop. Cut the crap, Dean. I know all about your little tryst with Elise last night at this very place. His face drained of color. What? How? Did you really think you could cheat on me and get away with it? I snarled, no longer able to contain my fury. Well, the game is up. I have proof of everything, and at our little pre-wedding party, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of lying, cheating scumbag you really are. Dean opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He simply stared at me with a mixture of shock, fear, and something else I couldn't quite place. That's right, I said coldly. This is just the beginning. Get ready to reap what you've sown, you miserable piece of filth. I got out of the car and stormed off, leaving Dean sitting there stunned. From that moment on, my life would be about one thing, making him pay. With the proof of Dean's infidelity burning a hole in my mind, I threw myself into planning the pre-wedding celebration where I would expose him. I wanted every detail to be perfect, from the venue to the guest list to the moment I would humiliate him in front of all our friends and family. This is going to be an event no one will ever forget, I mumbled to myself as I pored over the seating arrangements. I had requested a small stage area to make sure all eyes would be on me when I dropped my bombshell. Dean tried acting nonchalant in the days leading up to the party, as if nothing was amiss. Can't wait to celebrate our love with everyone, he'd say with a sickening grin, putting his arm around me. I wanted to scream, to unleash all my pent-up rage right then and there. But I kept my cool, responding with cold indifference. It's going to be a night to remember, all right. The morning of the party, Dean seemed to finally sense that something was off with me. Babe, are you okay? You've been acting kinda weird lately. I fixed him with an icy glare. I'm just fine, Dean. Don't worry about me. He opened his mouth, maybe to try and apologize or make an excuse, but I cut him off. Save it. You'll get what's coming to you soon enough. Dean blinked in confusion, but didn't push it further. Little did he know, his whole world was about to come crashing down around him. That evening, I greeted our guests with a bright smile, acting the part of the blushing soon-to-be bride. Inside, though, I was anxiously going over my plan one last time in my head. As the party reached its peak, I caught Dean's eye and gave a subtle nod toward the stage area. He furrowed his brow but came over obligingly, probably expecting some sappy toast or speech. Instead, I took the microphone and launched right in without preamble. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here to celebrate Dean and I's upcoming marriage. I paused, locking eyes with Dean, who looked slightly puzzled. Except there isn't going to be a marriage after all. At least not for Dean and I. The room went dead silent as gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dean's face drained of color. You see, Dean here has been lying to us all, I continued, my voice steady and carrying clearly. While he's been putting on a charade as a devoted husband-to-be, he's actually been carrying on an affair with a woman named Elise. More gasps and shocked whispers. Dean frantically shook his head, eyes wide with panic. But I was just getting started. That's right, I have proof that Dean has been sneaking around, meeting up with Elise at cheap motels to carry out their sordid little trysts. I pulled out my phone, and the damning photos I had taken spilled up on the projector screen. A shocked hush fell over the room as everyone took in the incriminating evidence. Photos of Dean and the blonde woman entering and leaving the motel, time-stamped and everything. I turned back to Dean, reveling in the look of sheer terror and shame on his face. "Well, Dean, anything to say for yourself?" He opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish. In that moment, I felt a surge of pure, vindictive satisfaction. He was finally getting exactly what he deserved. The night before the big pre-wedding party, I could hardly sleep a wink. My mind raced with a million thoughts and emotions, anger, hurt, but also a growing sense of power and determination. I spent hours going over every detail of my plan to expose Dean's betrayal. I practiced my lines, envisioning the shocked looks on everyone's faces when the truth finally came out. Part of me still couldn't believe this was all happening, that the man I had planned to marry had been lying and cheating on me this whole time. But the bigger part of me, the part that had awoken with a newfound strength and resilience, knew I was doing the right thing. Dean had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. No more games, no more lies, just the harsh light of truth, burning away all his deceptions. I thought about the looks of disgust and contempt his friends and colleagues would give him once they saw the photos of his tawdry motel rendezvous, how his professional reputation would likely take a major hit when word spread about his infidelity. A small, vengeful part of me relished the idea of his world crumbling down around him. Of course, my own life would be impacted too. The wedding I had spent months planning, now canceled. The apartment we had just moved into together, which I would likely have to leave. The humiliation of being the scorned bride-to-be that everyone gossiped about. But you know what? I didn't care anymore. In fact, I felt liberated. Free from the weight of Dean's lies and deception. Free to start over, to rediscover who I was without him. As the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, I got up and started getting ready, running through my mental checklist one last time. I laid out the photos and gathered up any remaining evidence, making sure it was all ready to present. My hands were shaking slightly as I applied my makeup and slipped into my dress. Not from nerves, but from a strange, thrilling sense of adrenaline. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for, when I would finally regain control and make Dean pay for everything. I took one last look in the mirror, studying my own piercing gaze. "You've got this, Mira," I told my reflection firmly. "It's time to show the world exactly who you are." With that, I squared my shoulders and headed out, ready to bring the entire charade crashing down once and for all. Dean was about to learn an important lesson. You don't mess with a woman scorned. When I arrived at the venue, everything was already set up perfectly. Guests were milling about, sipping drinks and chatting excitedly. They had no idea what storm was about to hit. Dean spotted me from across the room and started towards me, his usual charming smile plastered across his stupidly handsome face. "There's my beautiful bride-to-be," he called out jovially. I felt a surge of disgust, but managed a saccharine smile in return. "Hey yourself, honey. Having a good time?" "Of course," he replied breezily. "Our big day is finally here." I almost wanted to laugh at the blatant irony of his words, if only he knew just how wrong he was. It's going to be a night to remember for sure," I said smoothly, reveling in the subtle way his smile faltered at my cryptic tone. "Why don't you head up to the stage area? I've got a little surprise planned." "Oh, okay," he stammered, that first flicker of uncertainty igniting in his eyes. "Good." He was starting to catch on that something was very, very off. With Dean in position, I grabbed the microphone and signaled for everyone's attention. Showtime. As I stood on the small stage, microphone in hand, the room fell into an anticipatory hush. All eyes were on me, filled with a mix of excitement and confusion. Dean stood beside me, shifting nervously from foot to foot, like he could sense the storm that was about to be unleashed. I took a deep, steadying breath and launched right in. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Dean and I's upcoming marriage," I began, my voice ringing out loud and clear. A few cheers and whoops sounded from the crowd. I let that hang in the air for a beat before continuing. "Except, there isn't going to be a wedding after all." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Dean's head snapped towards me, his eyes widening in shock and panic. I fixed him with a steely gaze, not breaking eye contact. "You see, Dean here has been lying to every single one of us this whole time," I said, my words dropping like lead weights. While putting on a charade as a loving fiancé, he's actually been carrying on an affair with another woman. The room erupted into chaos. Shouts of disbelief, cries of outrage, a chorus of shock and anger. Dean opened his mouth, maybe to try and deny it, but I kept going before he could get a word out. "That's right," I said, louder, to rise above the din. "Dean has been sneaking around behind my back, meeting up with his mistress at cheap motels for their little trysts." With a few taps on my phone, the damning evidence lit up the screen behind us. Photos of Dean entering and leaving the motel with the mystery blonde woman, time-stamped and everything. Undeniable proof of his deception. A deafening silence fell over the crowd as everyone took in the incriminating images. Dean's face had drained of all color, his expression one of abject horror and shame. I turned back to address him directly. "Well, Dean? I'm sure everyone here would love to hear you explain yourself. Who is this woman you've been so intimately involved with behind my back?" He opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, his eyes wild and desperate as he looked around at all the accusatory glares fixed on him. In that moment, I felt a twisted sense of power and satisfaction. The tables had well and truly turned. "Funny, suddenly you don't have much to say, huh?" I said with a mocking edge. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or are you just speechless now that everyone can see what a lying, cheating scumbag you really are?" Dean flinched like I had physically struck him. Good. I wanted that blow to sting. Wanted him to feel just an ounce of the hurt and humiliation he had put me through with his abhorrent betrayal. I can explain," he finally choked out, his voice barely above a tremulous whisper. A harsh peal of laughter ripped from my throat. "Oh, I can't wait to hear this. Please, Dean, by all means explain to all of us how you could do this. How you could look me in the eye every single day while lying and cheating on me. Go on, I'm all ears." The silence that met my challenge was deafening. Dean seemed to shrink in on himself under the weight of all the hateful stares. In that moment, I felt a powerful sense of victory wash over me. The truth was laid bare, his carefully constructed facade of lies shattered beyond repair. There would be no coming back from this, no way for him to worm his way out with his usual smooth talking. As I drank in the look of utter desolation on his face, I felt something miraculous. The hurt, the anger, the feelings of betrayal that had been poisoning me for so long, they all just melted away. Replaced by an overwhelming sense of freedom and lightness. This was the fresh start I had been craving. With one fateful purge of truth, I had lanced the festering boil of Dean's deceit from my life, letting all the darkness and toxicity bleed out. I was free to begin again, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of that disastrous relationship, and in that moment, nothing had ever felt more liberating. The silence that followed my explosive reveal was deafening. Dean looked like a deer caught in the headlights, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly as he floundered for an explanation. Finally, he seemed to find his voice. "Mira, baby, I can explain," he stammered out, his eyes pleading. I scoffed loudly. "Oh, this ought to be good. Go ahead. Explain to all of us how you could betray me like this. How you could cheat and lie right to my face while I was busy planning our wedding." Dean's gaze darted around at all the accusing stares piercing into him. A bead of sweat trickled down his brow. It wasn't like that," he said weakly. "Elise and we just got carried away one time and—" "One time?" I cut him off with a harsh bark of laughter. "The photos I have are from multiple nights, Dean. Multiple nights you snuck off to some cheap motel to get your rocks off with your little side piece." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd at my blunt words. Dean flushed red, shrinking in on himself. She doesn't mean anything to me," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "It was just physical, baby. You're the one I really love." The crowd erupted in outraged shouts and cries at his pathetic attempt at an excuse. I held up a hand for silence, letting the anger and derision hang heavy in the air. "Is that really the best you can come up with?" I asked coolly once it quieted down. "Some lame line about it just being physical? As if that makes it any better?" Dean opened his mouth, but I cut him off again. "No, let me guess, Elise was just using you to try and get ahead at work, right? Taking advantage of your status and position? Is that the story you're going to spin?" His eyes went wide as I exposed the likely excuse he had been gearing up to deploy. "How did you—" I laughed again, a harsh, biting sound. "Please, Dean. I know your type, charming on the surface but rotten at the core. A sneaky, selfish snake who only cares about one thing, your own pleasure and ego." Elise herself suddenly spoke up from somewhere in the crowd. "That's not true," she cried, a defensive whine in her voice. "Dean told me he was going to leave you, that you two were already over." A stunned silence fell over the room as all eyes swiveled to locate the source of the interjection. Elise shrank back as I fixed her with a withering glare. "Of course he did," I said with heavy sarcasm. "I'm sure that's just what every slimy cheater tells their side piece to justify their shitty behavior." I turned back to Dean, who looked utterly stricken, beads of sweat rolling down his crimson face. "Well, anything else you'd like to add? Any other sad little excuses you want to trot out to try and save face?" He said nothing, just stared down at his feet, shoulders slumped in defeat and shame. I drank in the sight of his misery, allowing it to really sink in. "That's what I thought," I said with finality. "You've shown your true colors, Dean, and they're pretty damn ugly." With that, I turned and started to walk away, leaving him alone and disgraced on the stage. But I couldn't resist one final parting shot over my shoulder. "I hope you and Elise will be very happy together. You wholeheartedly deserve each other." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause as I made my exit, their voices buoying me up and filling me with a sense of empowerment. Dean's world might have been crashing down around him, but mine had just blown wide open with endless possibility. In the weeks following my dramatic confrontation with Dean, life took an unexpected turn. News of his humiliating downfall at the hands of his scorned almost bride quickly spread through our social circles like wildfire. Dean's career as a hotshot marketing director went up in flames as colleagues and clients lost all trust in his integrity. I heard through the grapevine that he had been forced into a less visible role, his dreams of continuing to climb the corporate ladder dashed. As for Elise, the ambitious coworker he had risked everything for, she slinked away with her tail between her legs once the truth came out. Turned out using Dean for career gain wasn't quite as appealing once his name was mud. I couldn't say I felt even an ounce of pity for either of their plights. They had made their sleazy bed, now they could lie in it together. For me, however, an unexpected renaissance was blooming from the ashes of my former life. In the aftermath of the truth bomb I had dropped, I found myself flooded with support from friends, family, and even strangers inspired by my bold act of reclaiming my power. Emboldened by this outpouring of positivity, I decided to lean into my newfound role as a scorned woman turned empowerment icon. I launched a blog sharing my story and advice for others going through similar experiences of betrayal and loss of self-worth. To my surprise, it took off rapidly, resonating with people across the country who saw shades of their own struggles reflected in my Truth to Power tale. What had started as a cathartic passion project quickly blossomed into a full-blown community and platform for open, honest discussions about relationships, boundaries, and believing in oneself. As the blog's popularity exploded, I found a new confidence and sense of purpose that had been utterly lacking in my go-along-to-get-along existence with Dean. This was the real me. Bold, straightforward, unwilling to compromise my values and self-respect for anyone. My brother Tom was one of my biggest supporters throughout this renaissance. "You know, part of me always worried Dean wasn't quite the perfect guy I built him up to be when I introduced you to," he admitted one day over coffee. "But I never could have imagined." He shook his head. "I'm just so damn proud of how you handled it all, sis. You're stronger than I ever knew." I gave his hand an affectionate squeeze, filled with gratitude for his unconditional love. "I'm stronger than I ever knew too, to be honest. But I have you and this whole community to thank for helping me find that inner fire again." As the months rolled on, opportunities continued opening up for me. Book deals, speaking engagements, even starting my own podcast to let my voice be heard on a bigger platform. I reveled in this new world I had unlocked simply by deciding to bet on myself. One night, curled up on my cozy new couch, I found myself reflecting on just how far I had come since those first devastating moments of discovering Dean's betrayal. Back then I had felt so shattered, so utterly adrift and lacking in self-worth. But now I was truly, blissfully free. Free of Dean's lies, free of society's restrictive expectations, free to boldly embrace my authentic self without apology. I thought of the old Spanish proverb about the tongue having no bones, yet being one of the strongest parts of the body, and I smiled to myself. The truth had not just set me free, it had set me on fire. And I had no intention of letting that flames be extinguished anytime soon. This was just the spark that would go on to ignite an unstoppable blaze. I couldn't believe my eyes. There he was, my husband Dan, locked in an embrace with some young woman on our kitchen counter. The grocery bag slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. The woman smirked at me. "I thought you were out of town." Dan quickly pulled away from her, panic spreading across his face. "Kate, you should have told me you were coming back early." I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. How could he act so nonchalant about being caught cheating in our own home? The woman hopped off the counter, not even bothering to cover up her state of undress. "I'll leave you two lovebirds to sort this out," she said with a wink before sauntering past me out the front door. Dan ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Kate, listen, I can explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off. "How you've been screwing some hussy behind my back, in our bed?" He flinched at my harsh words. "It's not like that. It just happened." A hysterical laugh burst from my lips. "It just happened? Are you kidding me right now?" Dan took a step towards me, arms outstretched in a placating gesture. "Baby, please, let's talk about this." But I couldn't bear to be near him, not after witnessing his ultimate betrayal with my own eyes. I snatched my car keys off the hook and stormed out without another word, desperate to put as much distance between us as possible. My mind was spinning out of control as I drove aimlessly. How could Dan do this to me, to us? After nearly a decade of marriage? Memories of our life together assaulted me. Our chance meeting in college, falling deliriously in love, the day he got down on one knee. I choked back a sob. Had it all been a lie? By the time I pulled up at Jenny's place, I was an utter wreck. She took one look at my red-rimmed eyes and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Oh, Kate, what happened?" I could only shake my head, words failing me. Eventually, the whole sordid tale tumbled out between hiccuping sobs. Jenny's face darkened with rage, and she squeezed my hands tightly. "That lying bastard," she growled. "Don't worry, we'll make him pay for this. He messed with the wrong woman." Her conviction steadied me, allowing a glimmer of strength to shine through my despair. Perhaps there was a way to fight back against Dan's betrayal. Jenny was right. He would regret the day he ever took me for granted. I must have sat there for hours, staring blankly at the wall, as memories from my marriage with Dan flickered through my mind like an old movie reel. How could someone I loved and trusted so completely shatter my world into a million pieces? "You need to eat something," Jenny said gently, placing a plate of toast in front of me. I shook my head, my stomach churning with nausea. "At least have some water, then." I took a few sips from the glass, if only to appease her. Jenny had been a godsend, letting me crash at her place after walking in on that horrific scene. I don't know what I would have done without her steadying presence. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked carefully. I laughed bitterly. What's there to say? My husband turned out to be a lying, cheating scumbag. "Kate," Jenny wrapped a comforting arm around my shoulders. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. If there's anything I can do..." Unless you can turn back time and stop Dan from being an unfaithful prick, I don't think there's much anyone can do. She gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "For what it's worth, he never deserved you. I always thought he was kind of a pompous ass, if I'm being honest." I let out a watery chuckle, remembering how Dan used to get on Jenny's nerves with his constant bragging about work accomplishments no one cared about. Looking back, there were so many little warning signs that he was becoming selfish and arrogant. I was just too blind to see them. "You know, when we first met in college, he was so charming and sweet," I reminisced. "He'd leave these cute little notes in my textbooks, surprising me with chocolate-covered strawberries on our study dates." Jenny made a gagging sound. "Please, spare me the gory details of your once nauseating love life." I swatted her arm, feeling a bit lighter. "Hey, you asked." We fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. My mind kept drifting back to that terrible moment of discovery. Dan wrapped around some faceless woman, their tangled bodies leaving no doubt as to what sort of sordid act they'd been engaged in. White-hot anger flared in my chest. "He's going to pay for this, Jen," I said through gritted teeth. "I don't care what it takes. That son of a bitch is going to get exactly what he deserves." Jenny's expression turned fierce. "Don't worry, we'll make sure of it. He messed with the wrong girls." A twisted sense of satisfaction unfurled within me. Dan had made the biggest mistake of his life when he decided to throw away nearly a decade of marriage for some cheap fling. And by the time I was through with him, he'd be begging for forgiveness. Just when I thought my life couldn't get any more chaotic, I got a frantic call from my sister. Dad had suffered a bad fall and was being rushed to the hospital. I raced over, my mind mercifully distracted from thoughts of Dan's betrayal. Dad was lying pale and unconscious in the emergency room when I arrived. The doctors explained he'd taken a nasty tumble down the stairs and sustained a severe head injury. They needed to run more tests, but the prognosis wasn't looking good. Over the next few agonizing days, Dad drifted in and out of consciousness. When he was lucid, he didn't seem to recognize any of us. The doctors warned there could be lasting brain damage from the trauma. I felt utterly helpless watching my once vibrant father deteriorate before my eyes. Finally, they discharged him. But with strict round-the-clock care instructions that would be impossible for my sister to manage alone with her 2 young kids. I didn't even hesitate before volunteering to be his primary caretaker. With everything so freshly imploded with Dan, it was a relief to focus my energy on something other than my own shattered heart. "Are you sure about this, Kate?" my sister asked worriedly as we got Dad settled at home. "This is going to be a lot of work." I forced a smile, pushing aside my doubts. Of course, Dad would do the same for us. And so I dove headfirst into the gruelingly difficult role of caring for my partially incapacitated father. Feeding, bathing, administering medications, it was utterly draining, both physically and emotionally. My once tidy home quickly descended into chaos and disarray. Not that Dan seemed to notice or care. "You've let this place go to shit," he muttered one evening as he shoved past me, his nose wrinkling in distaste at the pile of soiled towels in the corner. "I'm going out." My ire flared, but I bit back the heated retort hovering on my lips. I was simply too exhausted to expend more energy on him right now. If he wanted to slink off to meet his little hussy, so be it. In a way, his negligence was almost preferable to having him underfoot and making snide comments about my care for Dad that would inevitably ignite bitter arguments. At least this way there was one less person I had to worry about. As the months dragged on in a relentless cycle of mundane caretaking tasks, I started to see Dan's disinterest for what it truly was, selfishness and a callous indifference for anyone's needs but his own. Somewhere along the way, the man I fell in love with had become an utterly deplorable human being. One night, Dad shocked me by having one of his semi-lucid moments. "You're such a good girl, Katie," he murmured, patting my hand weakly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I felt tears prick my eyes at the rare moment of tenderness. "Don't worry, Dad, I'm not going anywhere." His brow furrowed slightly. "But what about Dan? He's lucky to have a wife like you." A melancholic look crossed his face. "Or at least he should realize how lucky he is." The words twisted like a knife in my gut. If only Dad knew the awful truth about his precious son-in-law's misdeeds. I forced a reassuring smile, not wanting to shatter his fragile peace of mind. "Don't worry about Dan," I said quietly. In that moment, I made a vow to myself, no matter what it took, that sorry excuse for a man would face the consequences of his despicable actions. If it was the last thing I did, I would make sure he got what he deserved. Months ticked by as I remained holed up at my dad's house, my entire world revolving around his care routine. Bathing, feeding, administering medications, the tasks became numbingly familiar. I tried not to think too much about the chaos my own life had devolved into. Dan's visits grew increasingly sporadic. Sometimes weeks would go by without me laying eyes on him. Not that I was complaining. His presence only seemed to agitate Dad with his perpetual scowls and huffs of annoyance. "Where's that sorry son-in-law of mine?" Dad would grumble whenever Dan was a no-show. Out gallivanting around, I'll bet. I brushed it off with a non-committal mumble, not having the heart to reveal the sordid truth. Let Dad cling to his antiquated notions about marriage and family for as long as he could. When Dan did bother showing up, it was solely to raid the fridge and complain about the state of the house. "This place is a pigsty," he groused one evening, wrinkling his nose at the pile of dirty towels. "Why don't you clean up a bit?" White-hot rage lanced through me, as if single-handedly caring for my ailing father while he was off doing God knows what wasn't enough. "If the mess bothers you so much, be my guest and tidy up," I bit out. Dan snorted derisively. "That's women's work." The casual misogyny of his remark struck me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to let loose a blistering retort, but Dad chose that moment to call out for me weakly. "Coming, Dad," I managed to grit out, turning on my heel and storming off before I said something I might regret. Later that night, as I massaged feeling back into my aching hands, Dad fixed me with those rheumy eyes that still shone with disturbing lucidity at times. "Dan's a real piece of work, isn't he?" he said frankly. "I always figured he took you for granted, but this is something else." My breath caught in my throat as I studied the drawn face of the proud, robust man he once was. Had he deduced Dan's perfidy on some subconscious level? The thought was almost too horrible to bear. Yes, well, I swallowed hard against the lump forming in my throat. "Some men just don't realize how fortunate they are," Dad grunted in ironic agreement. "Ain't that the truth? You deserve so much better than that, Katie." Tears burned my eyes as I squeezed his withered hand tightly. If only he knew the full, sickening extent of it all, the utter disrespect and humiliation Dan had subjected me to, but I wouldn't burden my sweet, ailing father with such ugliness. Not when he had more than enough troubles weighing on his fragile mind and body. No, there would be a reckoning for Dan's unforgivable sins soon enough. I could feel it simmering in my very bones like a primal force of nature waiting to be unleashed. He would atone for every last torment, every callous slight and indignity. I would make sure of it, or my name wasn't Kate Turner. After months of being Dad's sole caretaker, I was running on fumes. The doctor said he was stable enough for me to get a short respite, so I decided to head home for a few days to recharge. As I pulled into the driveway, an unfamiliar car was parked haphazardly on the lawn. Odd, Dan never mentioned having company over. I grabbed my bag from the trunk, too exhausted to ponder it much, and let myself inside with the spare key. The sound of raucous laughter immediately put me on edge. That definitely wasn't Dan's voice. Steeling myself, I followed the noise into the kitchen and stopped dead in my tracks. There was Dan, looking quite at home with a scantily clad woman draped all over him as they giggled like misbehaving teenagers. The grocery bags slipped from my numb grasp, clattering loudly to the floor. The woman's head whipped around, eyes widening almost comically when she noticed me. "Oh, shit." Dan, however, barely reacted, almost like he'd been caught doing this before. Maybe he had. "Kate, I can explain," he started, trying to extricate himself from the woman's hold. But I was already seeing red. "Explain what?" I snarled, cutting him off. "How you've been screwing this hussy behind my back in our own damn bed." He flinched at my harsh words. "Good." "Baby, it's not what it looks like." I barked out a harsh laugh, cutting off whatever bullshit excuse was about to tumble from his lying mouth. "Don't you baby me, you piece of garbage." The woman finally seemed to get the hint, casually righting her clothes as she slid off the counter. "I'll leave you two lovebirds to sort this out." She purred with a daring wink. My hands clenched into white-knuckled fists, desperately fighting the urge to lunge at her. Dan didn't even spare her a glance as she sauntered past, already turning those sickening puppy dog eyes on me. "Kate, please, we need to talk about this calmly." "Calmly?" I echoed in disbelief. "You want to talk calmly after I just caught you dicking around with some random slut?" Dan visibly bristled at my crass language, though it was nothing compared to the obscenities swirling through my mind. "Don't talk like that," he snapped. "You're better than this." The hypocrisy of his words made me see red all over again, like he had any right to judge me after his wanton infidelity. Snatching my car keys off the hook, I whirled on my heel and stormed for the front door before I did something I might regret. Dan scrambled after me, still babbling nonsensical pleas, but I tuned him out with ease. One thing was crystal clear in that moment. Our marriage was over. Finished. Done. He could beg and grovel all he wanted, but nothing would ever make me trust that lying snake again. I threw the car into drive and peeled out of there like a bat out of hell, tears of rage and humiliation stinging my eyes. How could he do this to me? To us? After nearly a decade of marriage and everything we'd been through? My mind kept cycling back to that repulsive image of him and that woman, intimate in ways that should have been reserved solely for me. I slammed my palm against the steering wheel, letting out a guttural scream of anguish. Well, two could play at that game. If Dan thought he could stamp all over my heart and get away with it, he had another thing coming. By the time I pulled up to Jenny's place, I was shaking with fury and an unsettling sense of determination. She took one look at my face and immediately ushered me inside. "Tell me everything," she said once I was settled on her couch, placing a steaming mug of tea in my hands. I didn't hold back, recounting every single agonizing detail from start to bitter finish. Throughout it all, Jenny's expression grew progressively more thunderous. "That lying sack of shit," she growled once I finally trailed off. "We can't let him get away with this." She squeezed my hand fiercely. "Don't worry, bestie. We're going to make him pay dearly for what he did to you. That bastard messed with the wrong woman." A mirthless smile tugged at my lips as our shared fury galvanized into a single-minded purpose. Dan thought he'd won by cheating on me so flagrantly? Well, he was about to learn the hard way that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I crashed at Jenny's place that night, too distraught to even consider going back to the house I had once called home. Sleep eluded me as images of Dan's betrayal played on a sickening loop in my mind's eye. Jenny tried her best to console me, alternating between gentle words of reassurance and furious rants about what a lying, cheating scumbag Dan was. As much as her anger resonated with my own, it didn't dull the sting of heartbreak shredding my insides. "That miserable prick doesn't deserve a single tear from you," she declared over breakfast, stabbing a fork full of eggs with excessive force. "We need to figure out how to make him pay for this." I rubbed my throbbing temples, the thought of vengeance doing little to lift my spirits at the moment. "And do what, Jen? It's not like I can take him to court over an affair." "Maybe not," she allowed, "but we can certainly make his life a living hell until he comes groveling for forgiveness." The idea held a certain vindictive appeal, I had to admit. After the fresh trauma Dan inflicted, the thought of him suffering even a fraction of my anguish scratched that primal itch for retribution. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm listening." A feral grin split Jenny's face as she launched into a dizzying array of increasingly over-the-top revenge schemes. Everything from airing his dirty laundry on social media to slashing his tires or egging his car. While cathartic, most of her ideas towed the line of illegal. "Those are all terrible plans that will just land us in jail," I pointed out dryly once she'd run out of steam. "We need to think smarter, not crazier." Jenny threw her hands up in exasperation. "Well, I'm all ears if you've got a better idea." Worrying my lower lip, I watched her absent-mindedly fiddle with the ring on her finger, an ostentatious diamond that her husband could ill afford on his modest salary. A light bulb went off in my head. "What if we hit him where it'll really hurt?" I said slowly. "His money and reputation?" She cocked a questioning brow, but said nothing as I rapidly filled her in on my half-formed plan. By the time I finished, Jenny was practically vibrating with sadistic glee. "Oh, this is going to be perfect," she crowed. "Dan won't know what hit him." I squeezed her hand tightly, a resolved calm settling over me. He's about to learn that betraying me was the biggest mistake of his life. Over the next couple days, we got to work, laying the groundwork for my meticulously plotted revenge scheme. The first step was hiring a private investigator to dig up every last shred of proof documenting Dan's sordid affair. "Don't stop until you have enough evidence to bury that scumbag," I instructed the brusque older man Jenny found. He grunted in affirmation, already snapping pictures of the sleazy motel Dan liked to rendezvous with his mistress at. "Don't you worry, lady. I'll make sure he can't wriggle his way out of this one." With the PI on the case, the next move was identifying the other woman. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction when Jenny's internet sleuthing revealed the little harlot's name to be Laura Whitley, daughter of John Whitley, one of the wealthiest businessmen in our city. "Ooh, this is going to be good," Jenny cackled as she pulled up a photo, a pouting blonde with ridiculous duck lips who couldn't have been older than 22 or 23. "Just wait until Daddy finds out his little princess is a home-wrecking whore." A hard knot of resolution formed in my gut. Dan had made his bed, and now it was time to lie in it. He and his childish mistress were about to learn firsthand why hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. With the evidence against Dan finally compiled into a thick dossier courtesy of the private investigator, it was time to set the endgame of my revenge plot into motion. "You sure you want to go through with this?" Jenny asked, eyeing the file apprehensively. "Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back." I felt no such hesitation as I gave her a resolute nod. Dan brought this on himself the second he decided to cheat. He's going to face the consequences, no matter how severe. After attempting to call John Whitley's office several times with no luck, we decided a more personal touch was required. Loading up in Jenny's car, we headed across town to the absurdly opulent Whitley estate. The snooty gatekeeper tried waving us off at first, clearly unimpressed by our determination. But Jenny smoothly name-dropped Whitley's wayward daughter, and we were promptly ushered through to the palatial mansion beyond the gates. My insides twisted nervously as we stepped into the cavernous marble foyer. What if Whitley didn't believe us about Laura's affair? Or worse, what if he simply didn't care? This entire plan hinged on him being outraged enough by his daughter's indiscretion to take decisive action. A liveried butler appeared to escort us to Whitley's study, his expression giving nothing away. The heavy oak door swung open to reveal a regally furnished space lined with bookshelves, and one very intimidating older man seated behind an ornate desk. John Whitley cut an imposing figure with his tailored suit and severe salt-and-pepper hair. His piercing gaze swept over us dismissively as we settled into the chairs across from him. "I was told you have some important information regarding my daughter," he stated without preamble, steepling his fingers. "Well, I don't have all day." Squaring my shoulders, I laid out the file containing all the damning photographic proof and detailed logs of Dan's salacious hotel meetups with Laura. I didn't mince words as I explained how she had callously shattered my marriage in pursuit of her sordid affair with my husband. To his credit, Whitley maintained an infuriatingly stoic demeanor throughout, though his jaw ticked almost imperceptibly as I recounted walking in on the two tangled together like horny teenagers. "I see," he murmured once I'd finished, flipping through the damaging evidence with a critical eye. "And what, pray tell, do you expect me to do about this unfortunate situation?" White-hot anger lanced through me at his apparent indifference. "Isn't it obvious?" I seethed. "Your daughter is a shameless, lying homewrecker who helped destroy my marriage. There need to be consequences for that." Jenny laid a restraining hand on my arm, shooting the patriarch a pointed look. "With all due respect, sir, keeping this buried will only enable Laura's reckless behavior to continue unchecked. Surely, as her father, you want to impart some sense of morality?" Whitley's expression remained inscrutable for a long, agonizing moment. Then, clearing his throat, he reached for his phone and quickly dialed a number. "Carter, get the Hampstead team ready to mobilize immediately," he said crisply once the line connected. "I want all vendors and partners notified that effective at the end of this week, our business relationship will be terminated." A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips as he hung up and turned his hawkish gaze back on us. "Thank you for bringing this unsavory matter to my attention. I assure you, my daughter's indiscretions will be handled with the appropriate severity." An almost gleeful shiver raced down my spine. If Whitley was taking such drastic measures to clean house at one of Dan's biggest corporate accounts, that could only mean one thing. He was about to lose his cushy, high-paying job over his despicable infidelity. Satisfaction sang through my veins as Jenny and I saw ourselves out of the mansion. The gears were finally in motion to ensure Dan paid for every last torment he'd put me through. As we climbed back into her car, my expression must have mirrored the sadistic glee coursing through me because Jenny reached over to squeeze my hand fiercely. "Don't worry, bestie. This is only the beginning of making that douchebag suffer." A twisted smile stretched my lips as I watched the Whitley estate disappear in the rearview mirror. Oh, I'm counting on it. The look on Dan's face when we strode into that sleek corporate lobby was almost worth the anguish he'd put me through. Almost. His eyes widened comically at the sight of me, clearly not expecting me to be the one accompanying John Whitley's stone-faced security detail. I offered him a sweet smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Hey there, honey," I said, relishing the way he flinched at the saccharine endearment. "Surprised to see me?" Dan opened and closed his mouth several times, his usual unflappable confidence deserting him. "Kate, Mr. Whitley, what's going on here?" The older man fixed him with a withering stare. "I recently became aware of your utterly unacceptable dalliances with my daughter, Mr. Turner. Suffice it to say, I'm extremely displeased by your despicable conduct." If possible, Dan paled even further, a thin sheen of sweat blooming on his brow as the implication sank in. "Good, let the utter fool squirm." "Sir, I can assure you whatever you think is happening." "Save your pathetic groveling," Whitley cut him off with a disdainful wave. "You're being terminated from your position at Hampstead Enterprises effective immediately. Any further business with my company and its partners is officially severed." A muscle ticked in Dan's jaw, the first hint of his long-buried temper slipping through that meticulously crafted veneer of nonchalance. "With all due respect, you can't just fire me like that. Not without cause." The older man barked out a humorless laugh. "You think I need cause after your sordid infidelity caused such embarrassment to my family? Don't delude yourself. Lawyers far costlier than you could ever afford have ensured this decision is unassailable." I had to choke back a burst of vindictive laughter at Dan's impotent scowl. For once, the arrogant prick was receiving precisely what he deserved, a harsh dose of karmic retribution. Just then, a familiar blonde head bobbed into view. Laura strode up in a tiny dress that left nothing to the imagination, clearly angling to pour on the vapid charm. Her expression soured upon catching sight of me. "Daddy, what's going on here?" she demanded in a simpering whine. "Why are you letting this psycho cause a scene?" "Enough, Laura," Whitley snapped, making her flinch. "Your utter lack of discretion has cost me dearly. As of today, you'll be cut off from any and all family resources and assets until you get your life in order." The blonde's jaw dropped in a mask of over-exaggerated shock. "You can't do that. I'll be ruined." "You've done quite enough to ruin this family's reputation already," her father said coldly. "Now, I suggest you gather what little dignity you have left and go. The police will be summoned if you linger." Her lower lip trembled petulantly, but a well-timed glare from the burly security guards had her slinking away with her tail between her legs. A lascivious smirk twisted my lips as Dan watched her go, his primary income and mistress ripped away in one fell swoop. He swallowed hard, the indignant mask finally shattering to reveal the pathetic excuse for a man. "Kate, please, you have to understand." "Understand what?" I cut him off, meeting his hollow gaze with steely resolve. "That you threw away nearly a decade of marriage and my unconditional love for a cheap fling with a vapid bimbo less than half your age?" Dan flinched as if struck. Good. Let the truth sting. His fragile ego deserved to be shattered into a million pieces just as thoroughly as he decimated my heart. Whitley motioned to his guards, and they began ushering Dan towards the exit without ceremony, but not before he cast me one last imploring look. "You're right," he rasped hollowly. "I should have told you I was coming back early. Enjoy your new life without everything you took for granted." A bitter smile tugged at my lips as I watched him being all but dragged out. After all his lies and betrayal, that pathetic excuse rang painfully hollow. As the door swung shut behind him, a weight finally lifted off my shoulders. Dan had been utterly stripped of his status, finances, job, every trapping that made up the pedestal he'd placed himself on above me. Justice had finally been served, in the most brutal and uncompromising way. And strangely, rather than the satisfaction I'd anticipated, I felt nothing but bone-deep wariness. "It's over," I murmured to myself as Whitley placed a gruff hand on my elbow. "Indeed," the older man replied, "though it remains to be seen whether this harsh lesson will truly impart any wisdom on my wayward daughter." I shrugged him off, eager to simply move on and escape the stifling tension that still hung in the air. Whatever Laura's fate, It hardly concerned me. "Thank you for handling the Dan situation," I offered politely. "I appreciate your assistance in making him face the consequences of his actions." A curt nod was my only answer as I turned on my heel and marched out of the building, leaving that sordid chapter of my life firmly behind closed doors. Would I ever be able to fully trust another man after this? Part of me wasn't sure if the effort was even worth attempting. But one thing was abundantly clear. The weak, simpering woman who'd allowed Dan's infidelity to destroy her sense of self-worth was gone forever. Whatever challenges still awaited, I would face them with my head held high and a newfound unshakable sense of independence. No longer would I ever let a man dictate my worth, my happiness, my entire existence. From this point on, I answered to no one but myself. I stared numbly at my phone, rereading Colin's text messages to a woman named Elise. The flirtatious banter, the pet names, the explicit details. It was all there, an undeniable confirmation of his betrayal. My heart pounded and waves of nausea washed over me. How could the man I'd loved and trusted for a decade do this to me, to our marriage? Memories flooded back. Colin's recent late nights at the office, his evasive answers when I asked about his work, the strange charges on our credit card statements. I should have trusted my instincts sooner, but I'd stubbornly clung to the belief that my husband was still the man I fell in love with. Anger simmered beneath the surface, tempered by a strange sense of calm determination. I wouldn't confront him now, not while emotions ran high. I needed a plan, evidence to back up my case. Colin couldn't just sweep this under the rug. The next few weeks were a blur of covert investigation. I scoured our bank statements, documenting every suspicious transaction. I discreetly reached out to Darcy, my old coworker from Colin's company, who reluctantly confirmed the rumors about his dalliances with a young intern. Armed with a solid paper trail and witness accounts, I steeled myself for the confrontation. When Colin announced a sudden business trip, I knew it was my chance to catch him red-handed. As expected, a quick call to the conference organizers revealed he wasn't registered. The pieces fell into place. He was using the trip as a cover to meet up with his mistress. When Colin returned home, I greeted him with a grim smile, laying out the evidence before him. Text transcripts, bank statements, witness testimonies. His eyes widened in shock, and his face flushed crimson as the weight of his deceit sank in. The weeks following the confrontation were excruciating. Colin refused to leave our home, insisting we could work through this mistake. His pleas for forgiveness rang hollow as the depths of his betrayal became clearer. "It was just a fling, Arya," he claimed, his eyes pleading. "A moment of weakness. You know I love you," I scoffed, shoving the damning evidence in his face. "Plane tickets to Cancun? Hundreds of dollars on lingerie from Victoria's Secret? This wasn't a fling. This was a full-blown affair." His expression hardened. "You've been spying on me? Going through my things? Don't you dare play the victim here." I spat. "I had to investigate because you've been lying to my face for months." Colin slumped onto the couch, head in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Arya. I never meant to hurt you." Hurt me? His betrayal had shattered my world, crumbling the trust and bond we'd built over a decade of marriage. How could I ever look at him the same way? As the days dragged on, Colin's pleas grew more desperate, punctuated by tearful apologies and empty promises. "I'll change," he'd vow. "Just give me another chance." But I knew the truth. Once that line was crossed, there was no going back. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a selfish, deceitful stranger. My resolve hardened as I consulted divorce lawyers, gathering documentation of Colin's infidelity and financial misconduct. I may have been blindsided, but I wouldn't be a victim. Meanwhile, Darcy continued feeding me inside information about Colin's dalliances at work. Apparently, his affair with Elise was an open secret, the subject of snickers and gossip around the office. "That shameless hussy was all over him at the holiday party," Darcy confided. Everyone knew something was going on. I felt a pang of anger towards this Elise. She wasn't some naive, love-struck girl. She was a conniving homewrecker who had willingly helped destroy my marriage. With each new revelation, the man I had once loved became more unrecognizable. The Colin I knew would never have risked his career, his reputation, our life together, for a cheap thrill. As I pored over the sordid details, something shifted inside me. The hurt and betrayal transformed into a simmering anger, a hunger for justice and retaliation. If Colin was so eager to discard our vows, I would make sure he faced the consequences. With Colin's deceit laid bare, I felt a newfound sense of determination. If he thought he could just sweep his infidelity under the rug and beg for forgiveness, he was sorely mistaken. I would make him pay for every lie, every betrayal. Channeling my anger into action, I scoured our joint accounts and credit card statements, meticulously documenting every suspicious charge and cash withdrawal. Plane tickets, hotel stays, pricey gifts, the evidence of his duplicity mounted with each uncovered transaction. Darcy became my ally in this quest, feeding me insider details about Colin's shameless dalliances with Elise at the office. They'd sneak off for lunch meetings that lasted hours. She confided with a sneer. It was so blatant, we all knew what was going on. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront Elise directly. If she thought she could seduce my husband and destroy my marriage without consequences, she had another thing coming. I tracked down her address and showed up unannounced at her door, leveling her with a steely glare. "So, you're the homewrecker who's been screwing my husband." Elise's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly regained her composure, a smug smile spreading across her face. "Colin and I are in love. He's going to leave his frigid wife for me." I fought back a bitter laugh. The naivety of this girl was almost pitiable. "Is that what he told you? That he'd leave me and his whole life behind for you?" Her bravado faltered, and I could see the doubt creeping in. With a twisted sense of satisfaction, I shoved the evidence in her face. Phone records, credit card bills, everything proving the sordid depths of their affair. "He's been lying to us both," I stated flatly. "I'm going to make sure you two face the consequences for your actions." Elise's cocky veneer crumbled as the reality of the situation hit her. Hot, angry tears sprang to her eyes as she realized she was just another notch on Colin's belt, a passing thrill to be discarded when the excitement waned. As I left her apartment, I felt a grim sense of vindication. The game was up. I had all the ammunition I needed to bring Colin's house of lies crashing down. Back home, I could sense Colin's unease as I continued gathering documentation. He knew I was up to something, but his meek inquiries were met with stony silence. Finally, I laid it all out, every last piece of proof of his indiscretions, his wanton disregard for our vows, and my trust. "What is all this?" he asked, feigning confusion. "The evidence of your lies and betrayal," I replied evenly. "I'm taking you to the cleaners, Colin. You're going to lose everything." For once, my husband was speechless, his bravado shattered by the cold, hard reality I had assembled. The shock and fear in his eyes filled me with a perverse sense of satisfaction. The scales of justice were finally tipping in my favor. With the evidence stacked against him, Colin's denials grew increasingly feeble. I could see the fear in his eyes as I methodically laid out my case. The proof of his affair, the misuse of our finances, the blatant lies. "This is all a misunderstanding," he pleaded, voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you, Arya." I let out a derisive snort. "Save it, Colin. I'm done listening to your excuses." Realizing I wouldn't be swayed, he switched tactics, trying to appeal to the memories of our happier times together. "Think about everything we've been through, everything we've built," he urged, reaching for my hand. "Are you really going to throw it all away over a mistake?" I recoiled from his touch, disgusted. "A mistake? You've been carrying on an affair for months, lying to my face every single day." Anger simmered in my voice as I jabbed a finger at the documented evidence. "The hotel receipts, the lingerie charges, the secret rendezvous with your little office fling, that's not a mistake, Colin. That's a calculated pattern of deceit and betrayal." His shoulders slumped in defeat. But I wasn't finished. "You need to face the facts. Our marriage is over. The only thing left is making sure you face the consequences for destroying my trust, for trampling on everything we once had." With that, I revealed my next move, consulting with a high-powered divorce attorney to ensure I received my fair share of our assets. Colin's eyes widened in shock and panic as I laid out the potential division of our finances, properties, and investments. "You can't do this to me," he sputtered, indignant. "After everything I've done for you, for this family?" I laughed bitterly at his audacity. "You've done this to yourself, Colin. I gave you my trust, my love, and you threw it all away for some cheap fling. Now it's time to face the consequences. His mask of contrition shifted, twisting into an ugly sneer. You cold, vindictive bitch, he spat. I'll fight you every step of the way. You won't get a damn thing from me. I met his venom with an icy calm. Go ahead and fight me, Colin. With all the evidence I have, the courts will side with the wronged wife whose husband flagrantly violated his vows and company policies. That last part seemed to give him pause. In his hubris, he had clearly underestimated the extent of my knowledge about his misdeeds, not just the personal betrayal, but the professional misconduct of using company resources to facilitate his tawdry affair. As realization dawned in his eyes, I could see the fight draining from him, replaced by simmering dread. He knew I had him boxed into a corner, with no avenue for escape. Reveling in my newfound power, I drove the point home. I hope she was worth it, Colin, because by the time I'm through with you, you'll have lost everything, your job, your reputation, your cushy lifestyle. All that'll be left are the ashes of the life you selfishly burned to the ground. With the gauntlet thrown down, Colin tried to maintain an air of nonchalance, but I could see the cracks in his facade. His usual cockiness had diminished, replaced by nervous glances and evasive body language whenever I entered the room. Still, I refused to let my guard down. I knew better than to underestimate his capacity for deception after everything that had transpired. A few days later, he announced he would be going on an overnight business trip to attend some corporate conference. Alarm bells rang in my head. This was highly unusual for his role. What conference is this exactly? I asked, feigning casual curiosity. Colin rattled off some vague details about team building and leadership training, avoiding eye contact. A blatant lie, no doubt. I waited until he had left before springing into action. A few quick calls to the conference organizers confirmed my suspicions. Colin's name wasn't on any attendance list. White-hot anger surged through me as the realization hit. He was using this fake trip as a cover to rendezvous with his mistress, likely thinking I was foolish enough to fall for his lies again. Not this time. This pathetic charade would be his undoing. I began meticulously documenting his absence, taking time-stamped photos and videos to prove he wasn't where he claimed to be. Every deceptive text message, every missed call, it all became part of the dossier I was assembling. The icing on the cake came when I tracked down the hotel where he was staying through his credit card records. With a few terse words to the front desk staff about a family emergency, I gained access to the security footage. There he was, bold as brass, arriving hand in hand with a scantily clad Elise, the two of them giggling and canoodling like love-struck teenagers. I felt bile rise in my throat watching the shameless display, but I maintained my composure, preserving the video for the grand unveiling. When Colin finally returned home, I was ready. As soon as he stepped through the door, I blindsided him with photos and video stills documenting his sordid tryst. "What is this?" he sputtered, face paling. "Proof of your lies," I spat. "Did you really think I'd be stupid enough to buy your pathetic business trip excuse?" Trapped, Colin reverted to his usual tactics, indignant denials followed by groveling pleas for forgiveness. But I was done listening to his empty words. I wanted him to face the consequences of his actions, to feel the full weight of the humiliation and devastation he had inflicted on me. With a few taps on my phone, I had emailed evidence of his affair to his entire office, human resources, senior management, everyone. Let them witness his despicable conduct firsthand. Checkmate, Colin. Your professional life is about to crumble, just like you destroyed our marriage. Colin's face drained of color as the realization of what I'd done sank in. His phone began buzzing incessantly, no doubt a barrage of inquiries from his colleagues about the incriminating evidence now flooding their inboxes. "You crazy bitch," he roared, fury contorting his features. "What have you done?" I met his rage with icy calm. "I'm just ensuring you face the consequences for your reprehensible actions. Did you really think you could carry on this sordid affair without any repercussions?" His eyes darted wildly as he scrambled for his laptop, desperately trying to control the damage. But I had already released the Kraken. Those lurid videos and text transcripts were making their way through the corporate grapevine like wildfire. "Please, Arya, you have to stop this," he begged, a note of panic creeping into his voice. "My career, my reputation." Should have thought about that before you decided to throw it all away for a cheap fling, I countered, unmoved by his pleas. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences for your lies and betrayal? Colin's mask of contrition promptly shattered, his indignation reigniting. You'll pay for this, he snarled. I'll make sure you get nothing in the divorce. You hear me? Nothing. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Even now, after being caught red-handed, he was more concerned about his money and status than the emotional devastation he'd inflicted. Save your empty threats, I shot back. With all the evidence piling up, the courts will side with the wronged wife whose husband flagrantly violated his vows and corporate ethics policies. As if on cue, Colin's phone started ringing again. A call from his boss, no doubt. He stormed off to take it, but the raised voices and profanity drifting from the other room spoke volumes. When he finally emerged, his face was pale and drawn, awash in cold sweat. The arrogant bluster was gone, replaced by a hunted look. Well, I prodded, what did they have to say about your extracurricular activities? Colin slumped into a chair, head in his hands. I'm suspended, pending an investigation. They're taking this really seriously. I couldn't resist twisting the knife. Of course they are. Can't have a senior executive flagrantly misusing company resources to carry on an affair, now can they? That's a major breach of ethics policies. As the gravity of his situation sank in, Colin's eyes took on a hollow, defeated look. I've ruined everything, haven't I? He mumbled hollowly. For a fleeting moment, a tremor of pity rippled through me. This broken, shattered man was barely recognizable as the arrogant philanderer who had so callously trampled on our marital vows just weeks ago. But the moment passed as quickly as it came. He had made his bed, and now he would lie in it, a well-deserved purgatory of his own making. Yes, Colin, I stated flatly. You've ruined everything, and you have no one to blame but yourself. In the days following Colin's suspension, an eerie pall hung over our home. The man who had once strutted around with such arrogant confidence was now a hollow, haunted shell. I took a perverse satisfaction in watching his world unravel before my eyes. This was the price he paid for his selfish betrayal, the loss of his career, his status, his ill-gotten trappings of success. The final nail in Colin's professional coffin came when Elise, perhaps sensing the shifting winds, decided to turn on him as well. A flurry of emails from her flooded his work inbox, providing even more lurid details and evidence of their tawdry affair. That little snake! Colin raged when he discovered her betrayal, hurling his laptop across the room in a fit of impotent fury. After everything I promised her, I couldn't stifle a mocking laugh at his indignation. What, you thought she was in it for more than just a cheap thrill? That she actually cared about your empty promises to leave me? His eyes smoldered with hatred, but I pressed on, twisting the knife. Face it, Colin, you're just a sad, pathetic cheater who got played by the very same woman you used as a plaything. You deserve every ounce of misery coming your way. To his credit, Colin didn't try denying the truth of my words. He simply shook his head, shoulders sagging in defeat. In that moment, I almost pitied the broken wreck before me. Almost. The final blows rained down in rapid succession after that. A scathing letter from the company's legal team, citing the mountain of evidence against him and demanding his immediate resignation to avoid a protracted dismissal process. Then came the notifications from our joint bank accounts and credit cards, everything frozen pending the division of assets in the divorce proceedings. With each new hammer blow, I could see Colin aging before my eyes. The arrogant swagger replaced by the hunched, shambling gait of a man utterly defeated. His desperate pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears. I was beyond appeasing at this point. The pièce de résistance arrived in the form of a tersely worded letter from Elise herself, detailing the lurid particulars of their affair in excruciatingly sordid detail. I made sure to leave it out for Colin to find, reveling in his anguished howls of despair when he realized I had seen it all. In a final act of masochistic self-destruction, he turned to the bottle, spending his days in a drunken stupor, railing about the unfairness of his plight. I watched in stony silence, unmoved, as he unraveled into a gibbering, self-pitying wreck. This, I knew, was the truest form of justice. To watch the man who had so callously shattered my world brought to his knees, forced to confront the consequences of his selfish actions. As our assets dwindled and his reputation crumbled to dust, I felt a grim sense of vindication wash over me. The debt had been paid. The scales were balanced once more. The weeks after Colin's ousting from the company passed in a blur. Our once luxurious home felt eerily empty, devoid of the trappings of our former life of excess. As part of the divorce settlement, we were forced to liquidate many of our assets: the sports cars, the designer wardrobe, the lavish furnishings he had acquired to soothe his ego. It was oddly cathartic, watching the material idols he had valued above our marriage get carted away, piece by piece. Colin himself had become a ghost, drifting through the house in a perpetual haze of self-pity and alcohol fumes. He had lost everything: his prestigious job, his status, even the mistress who had so eagerly enabled his downfall. A small part of me felt a twinge of sadness watching this once vibrant man wither away into a broken shell. But that fleeting pang of empathy was quickly overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of liberation I felt. For too long, I had allowed myself to be defined by Colin's success, content to bask in the glow of his wealth and status. But now, unshackled from the gilded cage of our so-called perfect life, I was free to rediscover my own passions and identity. I found solace in my art again, that once cherished creative outlet I had neglected for far too long. As the divorce proceedings crawled on, I would spend hours in my studio, pouring my emotions onto the canvas in a riot of color and texture. With every brushstroke, I could feel the weight of Colin's betrayal slowly lifting from my shoulders. The bitterness and anger that had fueled my quest for vengeance gave way to a profound sense of peace and acceptance. In the end, Colin got what he deserved. The court sided squarely with the wronged wife, awarding me a substantial share of our marital assets. Not that the money mattered much to me anymore. I had gained something far more valuable than any material possession: my freedom, my self-worth, my life back. As the divorce papers were finalized and Colin's pathetic form slunk out of my life for good, I felt an unfamiliar sense of lightness, as if a great weight had been lifted from my soul. No more lies, no more betrayal, just the beautiful, terrifying uncertainty of the open road ahead of me. In that moment, staring out at the infinite possibilities of my new life, I realized something profound. Colin's transgressions, as painful as they were, had ultimately been a blessing in disguise. They had shocked me out of my complacent existence and forced me to confront the harsh truths I had been willfully ignoring for years. As I looked back on the wreckage of our marriage, I felt no bitterness or regret, only gratitude for the lessons I had learned. I was no longer the meek, subservient woman who had allowed her identity to be subsumed by her husband's ego. I was reborn, tempered in the fires of pain and betrayal, into a strong, self-assured woman who knew her worth. With a serene smile, I turned away from the past and focused on the future stretching out before me, ripe with endless potential. Colin's sad, sordid tale was over, but mine, my real story, was just beginning.